2023 meeting of the Marine Resource Commission to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. France, followed by the invocation by Mr. Tankman. Thank you.
You all turn and face the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. As we gather for the April Commission meeting, let us be mindful of all that has happened to make this possible. Staff has worked tirelessly to bring this agenda together. We ask that our deliberations and decisions be thoughtful and fair. All are equal in our democratic system. Finally, we pray for the safety of our brave Marine police as they uphold our laws and promote stewardship of our natural resources. For this we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. And welcome to the April 25th, 2023 Marine Resource Commission meeting. This time we want to move forward with the approval of the agenda. Are there any corrections, deletions, or changes from commission members or staff to the current agenda? Yes.
Yes, sir. Item 2E has been removed from today's agenda.
2E.
We'll bring it back at a later date. It is now protested.
Okay.
Move to approve agenda as amended.
Okay. Been moved by Mr. Tankman and seconded by Mr. Headley. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? All in favor saying aye?
Aye.
Any noes? All right, thank you. Are there any corrections, deletions, or changes from commission members or staff to the March 28, 2023 commission meeting minutes?
Motion to approve.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Taker, motion by Mr. Erskine, second by Mr. Headley. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? All in favor saying aye?
Aye.
Are there any noes? Okay, one abstention. Ms. Lusk. Ask our BMRC members and BMRC staff, and also if them staff would please stand to be sworn in, that will be speaking or presenting during testimony. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you so much. Please be seated. At this time, we want to ask if there are move for consent agenda items.
Mr. Minor, members of the commission, good morning. In fact, the consent items are item 3. I believe you would like to hear the item 2, the permits that are over $500,000. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, sir. So these are the projects that have been subjected to a public interest review by statute. The fact that they exceed $500,000 in cost means that it requires the commission consideration. Staff has no authority to review them for recommendation. So we're going to present items 2A through 2D to you now. Item 2A, Smith Iron and Metal is requesting authorization to construct a marine terminal with a 400-foot steel bulkhead, a 111-foot long by 73-foot wide dry dock, 3 timber pile mooring dolphins, and 58,000 cubic yards of mechanical maintenance dredging to a maximum depth of minus 20 feet below mean low water at their property on a man-made basin adjacent to the James River in Chesterfield County. A turbidity curtain will be installed at the mouth of the basin prior to dredging operations and bulkhead construction. This project requires both a tidal wetlands permit and a subacres permit. This was previously permitted by the commission back in 2012. They let their permit lapse. So it is back before you for reauthorization, and they did do the tidal wetlands mitigation that we assessed back in 2012, so that is already taken care of. Item 2B, Huntington Ingalls Newport News Shipyard is requesting authorization to construct a pump house with 5 river water intakes and related wave barrier at the Newport News Shipbuilding Pier 9 on the James River in Newport News. The pump house will supply cooling water while nuclear submarines are constructed, and in the event of an emergency will be used for fire protection. The intakes will be fitted with a 3/8-inch screen and a maximum through-slot velocity of 0.4 feet per second for an average of 0.924 million gallons per day. The maximum through-slot velocity will only be necessary during times of emergency situations as if they have a fire. Item 2C, Riverport LLC is requesting authorization to construct a 500-foot by 3-foot wide floating security barrier system at the end of Pier 14 and 15 at the Riverport facility at 1201 Terminal Avenue along the James River in the city of Newport News. The barrier system will be attached to the piers by two 45-foot by 20-foot barges anchored by two 5-foot diameter steel hollow piles. The use of cushion blocks and ramp-up procedures will be required before installing those steel piles, and that's to minimize the potential for damage to fish. Lastly, item 2D, the City of Virginia Beach and the Public Works Department is requesting authorization to nourish 2,900 linear feet of the existing Croatan Beach shoreline, a maximum distance of 220 feet channel to mean low water between Ruley Inlet to the north and Camp Pendleton to the south. Along the Atlantic Ocean, Virginia Beach, approximately 150,000 cubic yards of beach quality sand will be hydraulically placed on the beach for material dredged from the Atlantic Ocean channel by the Corps of Engineers deepening project. Staff recommends approval of the project as proposed with special permit conditions. 2, permittee agrees to provide a post-nourishment beach survey reference to mean low water within 30 days of the completion of the project. And secondly, the permittee agrees to daily monitoring for sea turtle nesting on Croatan Beach in coordination with the Virginia Aquarium personnel. Any turtle nest located must be identified and protected from the beach nourishment activities. Mr. Minor, that concludes my comments.
Thank you so much. Any of the applicants or representatives, are there any here who wish to speak? Amendments in support? Anyone wants to speak in support? Anyone wants to speak against? Yes. The matter for the commission for discussion and action. Mr. Tankin.
I'll move to approve page 2 items.
Motion made by Mr. Tankin. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Brandon. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Discussion closed. All in favor saying aye? Aye. Any against? All right, thank you. So now we're at item 4 on the agenda. Madam Block, do we close the meeting consultation with or briefing by council?
So are we on, I think we did number 2 permits, and so I think we're on 3
correct. You just-
consent agenda items?
We don't have a consent agenda item for this month.
Okay, then we do not need a closed meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Here for discussion.
All right, so today I'm Rachel Peabody. You previously saw me as a Habitat permit writer in front of you for many years. I now have a new position at the Commissioner's Office, Director of Coastal Policy, where I do a number of cross-divisional projects, special projects management. And one of the special projects that we're rolling out is Virginia's new Abandoned or Derelict Vessel Grant Program. And so today is just a discussion for me to present the program to you and then to hear any comments and eventually a vote on our first application to the program. So abandoned or derelict vessels have been a problem in Virginia for generations of VMRC employees, but we've received a lot of energy in the last few years related to funding a program and actually getting removal of this problem. This energy started in 2021 when they were included in Virginia's marine debris reduction plan and were identified as one of the larger leading marine pollution problems in Virginia's waterways. That robust plan established a strategy to address the issue, and that includes prevention, research and monitoring, disposal and infrastructure, and removal of the existing abandoned and derelict vessels that we have. Following that document, the Coastal Zone Management Program and Virginia Clean Waterways created a working group. Many of our staff members were part of that working group, and the goal was to create a comprehensive, sustainable, and robust Virginia ADV prevention and removal program. And that was a document that came with a list of ideas on how we could do that. Those ideas were centered around the concept that the VMRC would be a centralized location of where that program would be run. So that paper recommended a number of things, but related to today, it recommended $3 million to the VMRC, specifically for a removal of the existing issues. They also recommended creation of a full-time employee for future program management to address some of the other issues like recycling, prevention, updating legislation that's needed for having a more clear law, and then creation of an advisory group that would inform where the future of that program would go. So as a result of those recommendations from the 2021 group, the VMRC did receive $3 million of general funds for FY22, specifically for the removal of abandoned and derelict vessels. The patrons were clear that they wanted this to be a whole government approach, in that the program would be managed as a grant program to local governments and other political subdivisions for removal of vessels in the area. We have built a grant program manual as well as an application process, and we are now in our pilot portion of the project that we are working with Norfolk and Virginia Beach. Today's application is the City of Norfolk, which is for reimbursement for an abandoned vessel that was in Willoughby Bay. So in March, there was a vessel owner who tied up his vessel at the Willoughby Bay boat ramp, and for a number of colorful reasons abandoned that vessel. While the City of Norfolk was trying to get that vessel removed, it sank overnight, and they had to kick into gear to do environmental containment, removal of any of the oils and other debris that came from the vessel, and then go through an RFP process to finally have it removed and disposed of. So they turned in an application for $20,606 for reimbursements for their work there. And the City of Norfolk staff and their environmental division have a history of doing really great work of removing vessels from Norfolk's waterways, and this was a great project to start as a pilot program. So you can see here the kind of process as the city was watching the vessel from it being tied off to sinking, the environmental remediation and booming, and then eventually the removal by H&H Contracting. So we don't have a regulatory requirement for the commission to approve disbursements of this fund, but I did want to bring this in front of you to see if you had any questions, directions that you would like the program to go, and also to get your vote of confidence for our first reimbursement to the City of Norfolk for the removal of that vessel. And then also let you know that we have an advanced fund application by the City of Virginia Beach that's on its way next month. That will be a much larger application to attack about 30 to 35 vessels in their city as well. So with that, I'm recommending approval of reimbursements of the expenditure to the City of Norfolk. I do think the City of Norfolk is here to answer any questions or to give you more background on the incident.
Okay. Any questions for Rachel? Agent.
Thanks, Rachel. Does this cover all size vessels, or is it limited to certain size vessels, or covers all vessels, sailing vessels, and motorized vessels?
Absolutely. Right now, we're trying to be as flexible to the localities as possible, see what we can work through, and this is seed money to see where should this program be going in the future. And there's going to be some localities like Norfolk and Virginia Beach who have the capacity to do the removal on their own. There's going to be others, maybe in the Eastern Shore or the Middle Peninsula, who are going to need some more creative ways of attacking this. So the goal is to just remove as much as possible.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Yes, Mr. Brown.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I applaud the program, and certainly I think it's really going to be really good for our community. The contracting, you're relying on the City of Virginia Beach, Norfolk, or any other municipality to use their contracting methods, multiple bids. You review that process when they come to you with a request for reimbursement? Is that
That's
how it
correct.
works?
Yeah,
Okay.
the application and the manual specify that, but absolutely, the RFP process, the request for proposal process, will be specific to the locality, and it will be up to them to make sure that they comply with the necessary regulations associated with that.
Yes, Mr. Tanker?
What about accountability for the owners of these vessels? Are they just off the hook and the taxpayers are subsidizing their disposal of a vessel?
So we're working that on the side. So I'm working with other major localities to start building some proposals that we can use that maybe gives a little bit more of a hammer than we have right now. We don't, through legislation, have great mechanisms. The fees associated with abandoned vessels are very low. So we're working on that as well. But for now, yes, we will do the investigation through either our law enforcement division or the city's law enforcement division. And then once the law enforcement officers think it's time for removal, then we'll pay for the removal.
Any more questions? No questions? All right. So I guess you need a vote of confidence, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Make a motion to approve
Okay.
second.
staff recommendation.
Motion been made by
Staff
Mr.
recommendation.
Okay, motion made by Mr. Erskine, second by Ms. Keller. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Discussion closed. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Thank you. Next item on the agenda, Army Corps of Engineers in City of Virginia Beach. Tiffany, good morning.
Morning. Okay. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the City of Virginia Beach is requesting authorization to construct a 23.2-acre artificial oyster restoration reef situated south of Bay Island in Broad Bay. This project is proposed as Phase 2 of the Lynnhaven River Basin Ecosystem Restoration Project in Virginia Beach and is protested by numerous nearby property owners. Here's a vicinity map showing the approximate location of the reef area by the yellow square wetland marker. The red star on the left-hand side of that aerial is where the construction laydown and transfer area will be. That's the city's Lynnhaven Beach and Boat Ramp facility. Material will be transferred to a barge there and then hauled through the Federal Long Creek Canal up to the project site. The project is situated adjacent to two existing oyster restoration reefs that were constructed jointly by this agency as well as the applicants in the fall of 2008 and are some of numerous existing oyster restoration projects that have been established in the Lynnhaven system. The project area is also situated within a previously existing private lease that was fairly large. That lease no longer exists in that exact delineation. Here's a plan view provided by the applicants of the reef area. The hatched area or the diagonal striped area is the proposed reef area. The two green polygons that are also shown are highlighting the two existing sanctuary reefs. This is another plan view. The outline of the reef is in dark black line. The one visible restoration reef is shown in green. Staff has highlighted the 7-foot contour for reference in red. Everything essentially south of that 7-foot contour within the reef footprint currently has depths of 7 feet or greater at mean low water. The reef area will consist of 6 inches of crushed stone topped with 6 inches of oyster shell and will be placed in 4 distinct reef striations that are each 50 feet wide, spaced 100 feet apart from each other and oriented parallel to shore. Just to clarify, the post-construction clearance would be at least 6 feet at mean low water. Here's a cross-section of the 4 proposed reef striations shown. The 2 layers are highlighted there. Mean low water is shown in blue for clarity, and each one of those structures has an elevation above it that shows greater than 6 feet of water present at mean low water. This is a large-scale cross-section in plan view provided, again showing some more of that detail. This is a photo showing the sample stone material that is proposed and two little fossil oyster shells that will be placed on top. So here's an aerial provided by the applicant. I will just note that this is slightly dated, so it looks a little bit different than the area that you've just seen, and I just want to clarify. So these two corner points that are white X's circled in red now represent the proposed corner points of the reef. This northern area that has the other white X's was originally proposed at the time that this site visit occurred, but is no longer proposed. So I do just want to be very clear that the northern portion stops here at these two red circles. Here are some site photographs, just a couple from our October 25th site visit. We went out on the applicant's vessels to see the project area, the distance from shore. They had set up those buoys in the configuration shown in the corner. So we're inside the reef footprint now, facing roughly northeast. And now we are outside of the reef footprints, facing northwest. These two buoys right here that are visible in the foreground represent these two in that drawing. As part of our permit review process, we conducted our standard public and agency interest review. The Department of Environmental Quality did not require a permit for this work. The U.S. Coast Guard had no objection to the proposal. The Virginia Department of Health determined that the project is acceptable and would not cause any change to shellfish classification areas. Additionally, the Army Corps Regulatory Division does not regulate or permit projects that are designed and authorized by the Corps' Planning Division. The Virginia Beach Wetlands Board issued a letter saying no permit was required. The Virginia Institute of Marine Science also evaluated the proposal and advised that the proposed reef structures are in location, are good and would likely support the growth and settlement of oysters in that area. And they also stated that the applicants proposed plan to inspect the material prior to construction to ensure that it is clean and debris-free was sufficient. Staff also notified over 300 adjacent riparian property owners along Broad Bay and all private leaseholders within Broad Bay of the proposal. According to the applicant, they also notified those adjacent property owners and leaseholders in direct proximity to the project site, and I believe this happened early in the application process. Commission staff received a total of 155 protests as of last night. And per their correspondence, their objectives are that the water is too shallow, the reef will pose a safety hazard leading to injuries, boat damage, and possible fatalities. The submitted application and bathymetric survey is inaccurate. The proposed reef location is not compatible with ongoing recreational uses such as kayaking, paddleboarding, jet skiing, tubing, swimming, and just regular boating. The reef also would make the area that is currently too shallow more shallow, and non-residential and inexperienced boaters also utilize this area pretty frequently, given the close proximity to the city's boat ramp at 64th Street. And so many of the comments stated that once the reef was constructed, recreational use in that area would essentially be forced to cease. And before I do go any further, I do just want to hand out the additional protests we received that are not in your packet, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
So ultimately, the protestants really didn't feel that the city or the Corps worked with them to develop a project that was suitable and amenable to all, and feel that the construction of this sanctuary reef is in direct conflict with the recreational uses of the area and the safety of those users. They did stress that their concerns are not restricted to just those local residents, but also to the boaters and folks that visit seasonally on weekends and during holidays to utilize the area. Staff also received 10 comments of support from citizens as well as from the Nature Conservancy, the director of the NOAA Chesapeake Bay office, and the Virginia Beach city manager. The comments include claims that the location is an ideal area to construct a reef of this size. The reef would be advantageous to the local habitat and better balances the interests of property owners and boaters. The project would result in improved water quality and positively impact the economy. Additional comments mention that the project construction and establishment of the reef in that area would enhance the biodiversity of species, including commercially important and recreationally important species that are managed by this agency. Additionally, this project proposes to meet goals established in the 2014 Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement, which aims to restore oyster populations in 5 Virginia tributaries by 2025. I also have additional letters of support that were listed. The city and the Corps has coordinated, held, or participated in, I believe, 4 different public open house meetings, which aimed to review the project with neighborhood residents, answer any questions, and address any concerns. The applicants did provide a write-up summary of the public engagement process, and that is in your books, I believe, page 19, excuse me. I'm sorry, page 34. 2 revisions, major revisions of the project plans resulted from these meetings with citizens and were submitted for review. So the original reef footprint that was received in April of 2022, it proposed a 31-acre area and included wider reef striations, narrower fairways, additional reef striations, and a 14-inch elevation. This newest proposal, the one that is before you today, has reduced the number of striations, oriented them parallel, increased the distance between the fairways from 80 feet to 100 feet, decreased the overall elevation of the project from 14 inches to 12 inches, and by removing those northern portions, the areas that are proposed now are currently in deeper water. As the co-applicant, the city has stressed that the reef proposal is adequately designed and located and is in the best interest of the city, its citizens, and the Lynn Haven system. Commission staff appreciates the city and the Corps' efforts for actively seeking projects that enhance the viability and sustainability of shellfish reefs in the Lynn Haven and its tributaries. Within the most recent 15 to 20 years, the Lynn Haven system has seen, tremendous improvements in water quality and oyster growth and can be attributed in part to projects like these. However, there is an inherent responsibility for these projects to abide by the public trust doctrine and ensure that everyone continues to have the ability and opportunity to safely enjoy the waters of the Commonwealth. The subject area has depths of 7 to 8 feet at low tide. If approved, the construction will include more than 7 acres of hard reef habitat, rock and shell, placed over that 23.2 acre area, and would result in a minimum post-construction vertical clearance of 6 feet at mean low water. Section 28.2, 1205 of the Code of Virginia pertaining to permits for the use of state-owned bottomlands specifically states that the commission shall consider the public and private benefits of the proposed project in order to protect and safeguard the public right to the use and enjoyment of subaqueous lands of the Commonwealth held in trust by it for the benefit of the people as conferred by the public trust doctrine and the Constitution of Virginia. In this case, based on the comments we have received from the public and other agencies, Commission staff concurs that the proposed reef will succeed in providing additional hard bottom habitat, promoting shellfish growth, and will ultimately work to enhance the two existing proximate sanctuary reefs that were partially constructed by this agency. Additionally, given the various meetings, site visits, and revisions that we've received, the applicant's willingness to engage with the public and adjust the proposal to alleviate any concerns has been clearly demonstrated. However, we also believe that the safety concerns that continue to be raised by many of these folks are significant and should not be diminished. There is also some concern regarding the reef's impact on the public use of the area within this waterway. This proposal ultimately requires a determination of whether the project benefits outweigh the project detriments, including all of those public safety concerns that have been raised. Given the breadth of the issues raised in this very unique and challenging case, and especially considering that the city as the co-applicant is representing the overall interests of its citizens, staff does not feel that it is appropriate to provide a specific recommendation to the commission. If the commission favors the proposal, we do. However, we believe the commission should find that the public and private benefits of the proposal outweigh the public and private detriments in accordance with all the factors contained in section 28.2-1205 of the Code of Virginia. In that scenario, the commission would need to conclude that the project merits are in the overall best interest of the citizens of the Commonwealth versus the protests and concerns specifically raised by Virginia Beach residents. If the commission is not in favor of the proposal, the request should be denied. If the city feels that such an artificial restoration reef should be constructed in the Lynn Haven, they can then continue to work with the Corps or adjacent property owners to redesign or relocate the project for future permit consideration. Should the commission choose to approve the proposal, staff does recommend that the approval include permit conditions requiring a pre-construction meeting, including the inspection of the material to be used, and a post-construction survey that identifies the coordinates of all reef striation corner points, as well as bathymetric data to be provided to the commission staff within 30 days of project completion. And that will conclude staff's presentation of the project. We're available for any questions. I know the applicants are here, as well as, I'm sure, a number of folks eager to speak to you.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. Any questions for staff? Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Tiffany, thanks for the great brief. This document calls for stone material shall be VDOT Class A1 stone. This is not reused concrete, recycled concrete. Where's this stone coming from, and who's going to inspect it?
That is correct. The stone is coming from an upland source. The Corps and the city have indicated that there would be, I believe, at least 2 folks that are continuously there to inspect the material. We also would be inspecting the material and have been invited to inspect the source material as well.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
The marking of the reef, the existing reefs that are there marked in the teal color, they're not marked in any way. No buoys, no signage, no posts. This reef, proposed reef, is also not going to have any markings or obstructions on the surface or anything like that, correct?
That is correct.
Yes, Ms. Keller.
Thank you. Fossil shells, I know we don't have an abundance of fossil shells available. Where did these fossil shells that they're gonna use come from?
My understanding is that they're all being pulled from Craney Island, so shell that has been deposited there over the years from various dredging projects.
Follow up. I guess to be more specific, are they from state-owned bottom, or are they owned by the state? I guess, who has ownership of the fossil shells? I guess that's my question.
I do not know the answer to that question.
I think originally VMRC would have had jurisdiction over their shells before they were dredged. I think there's sort of a byproduct of some of the dredging projects in that vicinity, and once they're on Craney Island, they're no longer considered state-owned shells. They're sort of a byproduct of a lot of the dredging projects that were intentionally sorted out over there by Army Corps. So I guess technically they're no longer, they're federally owned shells, or the Craney Island folks, which are managed by the Corps. So they're the Corps shells at this point. When they're still under the water, they're VMRC shells. But at this point, they're sort of a byproduct of that and are federally owned.
One more, one if you,
That's okay.
while you're there, Mr. Button. I was asking that question because if they were state-owned shells, I was gonna ask you if you thought it was the best, I guess, use of the resource.
Given that these shells, their location that they're not state-owned shells, we have used them in the past, so these aren't competing with any of our replenishment project shells. So it is probably, in terms of a beneficial use of dredged spoil, a good use of these shells. And just so the commission is aware, we are working on projects that would permit additional shell resources in the vicinity of federal dredge projects to make sure that we make better use of those shells going forward before they end up as dredge spoils. But I think it is overall, we're using oyster shells in this project. We're permitted to build more oyster reef, which is what we usually do as an agency.
Thank you.
Mr. Tankers?
Along those same lines, you mentioned here in the narrative that we already have 2 reef restoration projects in this watershed and the river system, I guess you would say. We're not reinventing the wheel here, are we?
No, we're not. Those 2 existing sanctuary reefs that are shown, I believe, are 1 foot off the bottom and constructed of shell, primarily shell.
And to follow up, it's the same process that you're talking about today.
I believe that these were sprayed. The applicants are proposing to mechanically place these stones and shell individual bucket loads.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Is the applicant or representative present and may wish to speak? Please. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right. Please proceed and state your name for the record.
Good morning, members of the commission. I'm Colonel Brian Hallberg. I'm the district commander for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Norfolk District. And I'd like to request permission for Heather to approach and provide some a placemat of the project. Heather? The members of the commission, Heather Lockwood and I were happy to provide a shared understanding of the Lynn Haven River Basin Restoration Project in our multiple outreach with the community. I understand the residents' fear and concern over this new project, specifically for recreation safety. And I want to assure everyone, the members of the commission and the members of the public that are here, that we have designed and redesigned this project to ensure that there is public safety whenever we're out there recreating. And I personally go out there. I enjoy the same watershed. I want to be able to boat over it with my children and have safety in mind. And so there's several questions that we continuously answer in this public outreach. And so one of them is, why does the Virginia Beach community need this project? And simply it comes down to that the Lynn Haven River Basin is an impaired aquatic river system. And this oyster reef improves not only the water quality, but it also provides the hard reef habitat for blue crabs and the pinfish, all the habitat that's needed for all the other fish that we go to the Lynn Haven River Basin to enjoy fishing, whether it's speckled trout or striped bass or red drum. And so it provides that added benefit. Another question that we get is, why construct in the middle of this open area where everybody recreates? Why not look somewhere else to build this oyster reef? And we've looked all over the basin area, and finding a suitable area where you have the hard structure on the bottom for the oyster reef just doesn't exist. So in the shallow areas where we've asked to look, it's just unsuitable for the oyster reefs to be sustainable. And this planned location, it's not a lease, so we're not taking away from any of the aquaculture resources. So this is the best place with a hard bottom to provide the reef. And you know, the last big question we get is the project safe? As you could see from the previous slides, there's already 2 adjacent oyster reef that are placed there. This reef is actually going to be deeper than the 2 previous constructed reefs. As it was previously stated, the height over the project is 6 feet at mean low water level, which means you can still boat over the project, you can water ski, you can tube, you can do all the same activities that you do today as in the future whenever the project, if it were to be permitted and constructed. And so I'm going to transition to Heather, who'll go over a little bit more overview of the project. But at the end of the day, this project will improve the water quality. It provides aquatic habitat in an impaired river basin. It provides suitable hard bottom for our investment to thrive, and it is safe to boat and recreate. So Heather, I'll transition to you.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yep.
Please proceed. Please state your name for the record.
All right, good morning. I'm Heather Lockwood. I'm the project manager for the Lynnhaven River Basin Ecosystem Restoration Project with the Norfolk District. So thank you, Tiffany, for a great briefing, and Colonel Hallberg. I'm hoping to help kind of clarify a few things and answer some questions that you guys had and continue to give the information about this project. So this is a part of a larger scale project. Lynnhaven River Basin Ecosystem Restoration has 3 different elements, 3 different habitats. Obviously, we are here to talk about the hard reef habitat. It has an overall goal of 31 acres. Phase 1 was 8 acres, and then our phase 2 is the remaining 23 acres, which would complete this element of our project. And of course, our sponsor, non-federal sponsor, is the City of Virginia Beach. And the main purpose, again, is ecosystem restoration for this project. It is also important to note that this project was fully funded, so both on the federal and the non-federal side. We have all of the money in hand to complete this project in its entirety. As many of them have mentioned, why did we choose Broad Bay? So initially, when we started this project, we of course have to look for suitable bottom, hard bottom, where we're not going to put substrate. It's going to sink into the mud and not be a sustainable project. So looking around, of course, you know, the Lynnhaven is full of leases, and so finding not only an area, but a lease that the city would hold that has suitable bottom is troublesome. And then in the fall of 2021, when we heard that this area was set aside, the 100 acres, to not be leased, we thought, okay, let's go check it out. Maybe it's a potential for a restoration project. Again, we have those 2 reefs that were built in 2007 and 2008. They were built with all shell. They were deployed using a cannon, so a water cannon spraying the shell, and they were actually built at a height of 18 to 24 inches. And our proposed reef is 12. So we have over 15 years of data on these reefs. We know how they operate in the Lynnhaven. We know the success. We know that we can confirm with the public that, you know, people are worried about, as oysters are growing, are they going to continue to lose clearance above the water? And we know that how the oysters are settling into that area, that they will not. There were also, the public has been worried about horizontal expansion. And because of the data that we have, excuse me, from these reefs, we're able to answer those questions. And as I mentioned, this 23 acres is the conclusion of our Lynnhaven hard reef habitat element. So we will not, under this project, need to construct any more reefs in the Lynnhaven after this project is hopefully constructed. So as mentioned, we have a lot of data gathering. We went out and we did pulse soundings to make sure that the area is hard, suitable bottom where we can place the material. That's how we initially started with our 31-acre footprint. And we also, in January of 2022, had a bathymetric survey done to see the depths, to make sure, again, what we are building is going to be safe for recreation and navigation to continue as planned. Go back one. And that's where we started with our first design that Tiffany showed. So we started out with that 31 acres. We had the curved contour. We had 80-foot spacings in between, and we were actually using crushed concrete and then 80-foot spacings and a 14-inch height. Now, after our public meeting in May of 22, hearing from the public, taking and reading each and every protest, we also got to meet with the Broad Bay Island Civic League. We went to them and had a meeting. We again heard their comments. Senator DeStef was also brought into the conversation over the summer of last year, and we started to work around what the public was saying. We switched our orientation from that curved pattern to parallel because we heard from the commercial and recreational fishing that this would be better for them to have parallel stripes, as well as increasing the spacing from 80 feet to 100 to allow more bare area for crab pots and things of the like. Also, our design is that stripe pattern. You guys were asking about, if we're reinventing the wheel of construction and of oyster, and as oyster technologies have advanced, we've learned that we can cover with the stripes rather than a blanket cover, and we increase the edge habitat. Edge habitat is great for all kinds of aquatic life, like clams and crabs and the finfish that we're hoping to get to the area, and we receive even more benefits than a blanket coverage. So then in the fall, like as Tiffany mentioned, we had a site visit where we brought VMRC, we brought Senator DeStef, we brought the former and the current president of Broadway Island Civic League out to the site. We wanted to show them, we marked it with the buoys to see how close it was to the nearest docks. We had our survey vessel to show them real time how deep we were and to ensure that what we are proposing is accurate so they could see it firsthand. We then had a follow-up meeting with Broadway Island Civic League in November, and other civic leagues were present, and we got to, again, hear comments. And we kept hearing that the depth was the biggest issue at this point. And so in December, after a public meeting organized by Senator DeStef, we decided to go ahead and remove that top option area, which was the shallowest area, which allowed us to have this final design that you see before you. So our final design is 23.2 acres. We have 4 stripes, which will be the substrate, and it is a max height of 12 inches, 6 inches of the crushed stone, so it'll be clean, sourced stone from a quarry. The 6 inches of fossil shell that we're placing on top, as Tiffany and Andrew mentioned, it is coming from Craney Island, and has been sitting there as separated during dredging. We realized that we were pulling up shell. Of course, it's a very limited resource. We want to make the best use of it, and so we thought let's put it to use right now in Broad Bay. And so also then of course we have that 100-foot spacings. And one of the ways that we are going to be deploying, as mentioned, is with a clamshell and bucket. This allows for precision and accuracy when placing the material. The bucket will actually be rigged with the GPS, so we will know every drop that is done. We can know where it's placed. We're taking it even a step further, and in between, pre-construction, we're requiring the contractor to do an additional bathymetric survey, because again, once construction starts, we want them to get their soundings. Then after the first layer of 6 inches of stone, we're actually requiring them to do another survey. We want to make sure that we are placing 6 inches of stone. And then once that is confirmed, then we will add the 6 inches of shell and do a final as-built survey. So we are actually requiring 3 surveys for the contractor to perform, again, to ensure that the quality of what we are saying, what we're placing, and the quality control is there. We also have 2 dedicated staff that are for this project that will be on site, one in terms of quality control, and then the other for safety, again, monitoring what is going in the water. Before the material is placed in the water, we always have invite VMRC and DEQ to inspect the material. It has to be clean, of course. We're actually requiring additional clarifications and quality control to test the material if needed. But again, it's going to be clean and sourced from a quarry. Nothing it will be recycled. And then, of course, after we are done constructing, we don't just walk away from a project. We move into our monitoring phase. So I mentioned we have over 15 years of data for the 2007-2008 reefs, and this reef will be the same. So as soon as it is constructed, we'll move into monitoring and monitor not only for the hard reef habitat, but also for just seeing the performance of the reef. So this is my second to last slide, and this is probably the one that's most, one of the ones that are very important, is the navigation and recreation concerns and how we have addressed it. So we hopefully, we've worked very closely with the public, taken all of their concerns into consideration. We've buffered away from oyster leases, which are the light pink polygons that you see in the image right there. We've ensured that we're at least 341 feet away from private docks. We're now nowhere near the channel, And then, of course, allowing that at least 6 feet of clearance at mean lower low water. And that's, of course, just, twice a day for a short period of time, they will have the minimum of 6 feet. And that is really just located in that top right corner, kind of where it's pointing to that first stripe, as Tiffany had it really well depicted on hers as well, on her image. And we will, of course, not have any navigational markers. I know that was said, but I'll just reiterate that because that, of course, would have caused a recreation or a navigation hazard. So we definitely took that into consideration as well. So my final slide is just talking about our project goals. Of course, our main goal is that hard reef habitat, increasing the aquatic life that could come to the area. We will be monitoring for secondary production, so seeing what other critters are coming, hoping to get some nice recreational and commercial fish back to the area, using the reef. Like I mentioned, the edge habitat being very important. Water quality, of course, is very important to us as well as to the community. While Broad Bay is in good condition for swimming and recreating, it is poor for aquatic life, so hoping to increase that. And then the nearby creek of Lake Long Creek is not safe for recreation and swimming, so hoping that the additional water filtration capabilities that oysters provide will help continue to clean the whole system and extend beyond the limits of our project. This is also, the Lynnhaven is one of the targeted tributaries for the 2014 Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement, restoring the 5 tributaries by 2025. So those 23 acres will get us that much closer to that blueprint goal. And then, of course, like I mentioned, this would be the final piece for Lynnhaven River Basin ecosystem restoration. For the hard reef habitat element, we only need to construct 23 acres to make that 31-acre goal. And with that, I know the City of Virginia Beach is here as well, but I will take any questions.
All right, any questions for Ms. Lockwood? Yes.
Thanks, Heather. The 23 acres that are proposed, the other 8 roughly acres, are those in the other 2 reefs that we saw that were constructed, or is that something else?
They are, on the first slide, they're the other little blue polygon, kind of in the middle of the picture. It's near Dix Creek. It was the 28,000 reef balls constructed in 21.
Okay, follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please.
So one of the concerns seems to be in the presentation is safety. So have there been any reported incidents of safety with those other reefs constructed?
We have not had any reported injuries.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Tankard?
You mentioned, or before, the speaker before mentioned impaired waters. What does that mean? And did you also say in the same watershed there's water that people can't swim in because it's so polluted?
Yeah, so I did some research on it with the EPA's website and kind of looked at the Lynnhaven Basin as a whole. And some of the Lynnhaven, due to dissolved oxygen mainly and chlorophyll, they don't recommend swimming and recreating in Long Creek. While Broad Bay, it is safe. Some nearby creeks and tributaries off Lynnhaven are not due to bacteria and such. And so just hoping to expand that.
By the way, Mr. Tankard?
So you believe that reefs like this can actually improve the water quality in this area? And have you seen that happen in other ecosystems?
I do, absolutely, because, Broad Bay initially it used to not be safe to swim in. And now we have, among other best management practices on land, as well as in the water, like restoration reefs like this, we are seeing improvements in the water. We're seeing things come back. Anecdotally, I've heard that, jellyfish were prevalent 20 years ago, 30 years ago in Broad Bay because the water clarity was poor and the turbidity was so high. And now you don't have to see that. We're able to recreate, and that's because due to all the improved water quality, but again, best management practices that have been implemented over the years.
Thank you.
Yes.
I see you have 4 lines that you are gonna plant the oysters. Why not use the whole permitted area for to get the best out of the whole permit area versus those 4 straight lines?
So as oyster technologies have advanced over the years, we've learned that at a minimum, if you can provide 30% cover across a reef or across a polygon, you can receive the same environmental benefits and habitat benefits as doing the whole thing. As well as if we were to cover the entire thing, sometimes you get dead zones in the middle of the reefs where it's not as productive and things, it's not as much of a habitat. I mentioned by doing rows as well, that edge habitat is really where a lot of critters like to be, like clams and fish and crabs. They really like to be along those edges. Thank you.
So staff provided a sign-in sheet of folks who want to speak in support of it, so I'm gonna ask that you all will come up. John Corte, Bill Burnett.
Excuse me, I just want to clarify, I think the city is also here. I'm not sure if they would like to speak
Okay, fine.
on their behalf as well.
Sure, come on up, I'm sorry. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir, I do. Good morning, commission members. My name is Phil Pullen. I'm the city engineer with the City of Virginia Beach. I speak today on behalf of the city manager and city leadership in support of this project. The city has long been in support of the Lynnhaven River Basin Ecosystem Restoration Project and associated phases. City leadership has demonstrated a commitment to restoring the Lynnhaven River watershed since establishing a CIP for restoration efforts back in 2003. City of Virginia Beach has had successes in partnering with the Corps of Engineers on past phases of this project, and the continuous restoration efforts by the region are showing results for a healthier ecosystem. City leadership are in support of this Phase 2 reef site for its benefit toward restoring the Lynnhaven River and achieving the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement restoration area goals for oyster reef restoration. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? That's it, any questions? All right. Any speakers in support of this, please come forward. I do have a sign-in sheet, and when I call your name, you'll please come forward. Bill, I believe this is Burnett.
I am in opposition, not support, so you want me to go now or wait?
Okay, you have on here yes, which means that you, okay, all right, okay? Okay, speak, okay, all right, okay, all
My
right.
yes was for speaking.
Okay, all right, speak, okay, I got you, all right. Any speakers in support of this, please come forward. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but truth?
Yes, I do.
All right, please proceed, and please state your name for the record.
My name is Russell Burke. I am a marine biologist, trained at the Virginia Institute of Marine Science and a current professor at Christopher Newport University. I've worked in and around the Lynnhaven River since the early 2000s and have been party to the plans and monitoring of the two major projects that you see in Broad Bay. Currently, we'll be monitoring the Pleasure House Creek reef balls, and should this project be constructed, I'm set to monitor it as well. In part because the use of alternative substrates for oyster restoration has been the focus of my work for the better part of 20 years. And I just want to confirm the claims of the Colonel, Heather Lockwood, the City of Virginia Beach, and Ron Lipsius from Virginia Institute of Marine Science, who couldn't be here today, but he submitted his report, which was a joint report between VIMS and CNU. And we've seen nothing but positive results: water quality, oysters, mussels, fish, and crabs on projects like this in Lynnhaven, in the Piankatank River, in the Great Wacomico River, and even the Elizabeth River, where some of the original experimental alternative substrate reefs were constructed around 2013. And I just wanted to provide my full-throated support for this construction and remain available if you have any technical questions today or in the future.
Thank you, sir. Yes, question?
I noticed in some of the protestants' comments, they mentioned trash. What's the probability that trash will be part of the substrate here in this operation?
I would say that there is next to no possibility of trash for this construction. For the source of the granite that they will be using and the shell itself, it is highly regulated. And I'm aware of some of the previous issues with crushed concrete in the region. That will not be an issue with these substrates.
Any more questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Brent James. Please swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but truth.
I do.
Please.
My name is
state your
Brent
name.
James. I'm a waterfront homeowner on the Lynnhaven. I lived there for close to 30 years now. I've worked in oyster restoration for a good portion of that time. The concerns that you will soon hear being expressed for safety in particular have not proven out to be the fact of the matter is that they're just not as viable as you will be made to understand. We have about 100 acres of restored reef in the Lynnhaven at this time, and there have been zero reports of accident, incident, or injury on any of those reefs. The Army Corps, and Heather touched on this, put 8 acres in the Dix Creek area of the eastern branch of the Lynnhaven, 28,000 reef balls that are 12 inches high and 12 inches wide. And there was a great hue and cry about safety and blood in the water and broken bones and injured people and children's lives and this and that. Not a one of those has proven out to be true. Not one. Not a single injury. That was 2 years ago. It's now a flourishing reef. It's contributing greatly to the ecosystem in the eastern branch, and we're starting to see tremendous water quality improvements. The question about water quality improvements, we're at 52% of the Lynnhaven is still condemned. 48% is open for open water by the Department of Health. So we've got a long way to go. You know, the good news is we've got 48% open. 20 years ago it was only 2% open. The bad news is the tougher 50%, 52% is ahead of us. As we work farther south down toward Virginia Beach Boulevard, it becomes much more difficult to clean the water up. So this project will contribute greatly to that in the Broad Bay portion of the ecosystem, and then other projects will continue in other areas.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Next speaker, Holly Birkenholt. Okay. Andrew Larkin.
Hey, good morning, Commissioners. I'm Andrew Larkin, and I work for the NOAA Chesapeake Bay office, and I'm here to speak in support of the Army Corps' permit application.
Let me swear you in. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please proceed. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. As you know, VMRC, the Army Corps, and NOAA have had a successful partnership in implementing oyster restoration goals that were part of the 2014 Chesapeake Bay Agreement. Partners have reached the goals for tributaries, for 4 tributaries in Virginia, with the Lynnhaven being the last remaining tributary for oyster restoration goals. VMRC, the Army Corps, and NOAA have worked together to create a science-based blueprint for implementing oyster restoration in the Lynnhaven. And in support of those blueprint efforts, in 2019, NOAA provided funding to VMRC to construct about 14 acres of oyster reef in the Lynnhaven. As a result of projects like this one, the restoration partners are close to completing the goals for the restoration blueprint in the river. And the Army Corps' proposed project is essential to reaching the goals for the Lynnhaven, and we believe will provide a benefit to the ecosystem. Oyster reefs, the benefits of oyster reefs have been discussed. I won't belabor the point other than just to echo those. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Are there any more in favor or support of this paper? Please come forward. Any more? Okay. Any against? I see Rick Boyles, your name is on here. Rick Boyles? Okay, please come forward. Please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please proceed and state your name for the record.
My name is Rick Boyles. I'm a lifelong resident of the city of Virginia Beach and a boater in the Broad Bay, Lynnhaven Inlet, Chesapeake Bay for over 50 years. I would like to first compliment Mrs. Burge and Ms. Lockwood on their excellent presentations, which took a lot of the wind out of my sails. They answered several of the questions that I had that I was going to bring up in this comment. I think the ultimate underlying question at this stage of the game becomes the public trust doctrine, Article 11 of the Constitution, 28.2-1205A of the code, and whether or not the best interest of the citizens are being represented here, as opposed to what they want to do with this oyster reef restoration. I would also note that there are other locations in Broad Bay that I didn't see addressed, predominantly on the south side of Broad Bay as opposed to the north side. There are some Baylor grounds over there. There may be some area over in that neck of the woods that would be a better suited location. I'm not an expert on this, so all I can do is bring it to everyone's attention. The only other questions that I might bring up is how much of the old reefs that were put in 2007, 2008, how much have they grown in height? I don't recall if there was a bathyspheric survey on those recently. And what is the height of this reef going to be in 5 or 10 years? Would it impede boat traffic and or recreational activities? You voted down several months ago a proposal to do floating oyster cages in this general area. And it's not being in the citizens' best interest. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Next, Zach Martin.
Sorry for the confusion. I am a representative with Army Corps.
Okay.
Yes, for questions.
Gotcha. Okay. Bill Burnett. Please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please proceed and state your name for the record.
My name is Bill Burnett. I'm a citizen of Virginia Beach and a direct stakeholder. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, for letting me speak today. In addition to being a stakeholder and a resident directly on the water in Broad Bay, I also serve on the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Board for the City of Virginia Beach. So I understand, just as you, more than most, the need for water quality in our bay and how we need to improve it. So I understand the responsibilities that you guys have because I was sitting right where you were yesterday for our hearing. This is a big deal. 22 acres in the middle of Broad Bay that we're going to sit here in the most highly trafficked area in all of Hampton Roads. I sit there on my dock on the weekends and count. Over 500 boats a day come by. That is incredible density. And the water is constantly shifting there. The topographicals, I believe, that were done by NOAA, they're probably not accurate these days. I went out in my boat looking at my depth finder where those markers were, and I was seeing water as shallow as 3 feet in some areas, some 5, some 6. The problem with Broad Bay is there's such a tidal area coming through there, we're constantly changing. Mr. Tankard, you asked specifically about the 2007 reefs that were there. Well, they're right across from my home. They're supposed to be submerged, but from 1.5 hours on either side of mean low tide, they are exposed, and we've watched them grow. This traffic area, as I said before, is so highly density. There's so much traffic. We have 5 different law enforcement agencies coming through, just trying to regulate all the boats that come through there, just to give you a sense of how many people are there, especially on holiday weekends. The area in question is where most people water ski and tube. So when someone falls off a tube or a water ski, you don't just stop in the water, you fall a few feet into the water. I remember as a child on the Lafayette River water skiing one day, falling, and I fell, unfortunately, into an oyster bed. I lacerated my leg, I lacerated my arms. It was not a fun experience, to say the least. Fortunately, there was no major damage, but I do have scars still from it this day. There are other areas in Broad Bay that we can move this to. The Corps of Engineers has said no. I respectfully disagree. Over by the Brock area, over on the south side of the Lynnhaven River, there are plenty of areas that are not congested, that don't have the heavy boat traffic that we have there, that could be moved. There's got to be another place to put this besides where we're putting it right now. I feel like the city and the Corps have taken the path of least resistance. This is the easiest place to do it. There's a better place to do it, but this was the easiest. Therefore, also over 155 of my fellow stakeholders have protested against this and said, we do not want this here. We're concerned about our safety. So I ask this board to please deny this application today. Thank you very much for your time.
Any questions? No. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, so I understand that you're actually impacted directly by this. You have, I presume, a dock if you have a vessel in
I have a
this
dock
area.
and a vessel. My children and I go out every weekend and go water skiing right in those areas. And it's hard enough, you have to have your head on a swivel just to make sure you're not gonna hit another boat. That is, I can't stress enough how congested this area is. There is nowhere else in Hampton Roads that has more density of boat traffic than Broad Bay. And we're all out there doing our recreation. And my concern is these other oyster reefs where someone said there's been no injuries. Well, they're in areas, the existing reefs are in areas where you really can't, they're not navigable waters because it's shallow where they are or they're along the shore. This is in the middle, right where they're proposing, where everyone on Broad Bay water skis and tubes because the channel runs to the south side of Broad Bay. So that area out there is a non-navigable area, and that's where we all go and do recreation.
But my question actually pertains to your private pier. Do you have any issue ingress and egressing from your pier due to the existing reef or the proposed reef?
Not to ingress or egress.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for your time.
Brian Hallberg.
Sorry, I was just
John Corte. One second. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please proceed.
Thank you.
State your name.
Thank you. So I grew up on Broad Bay, and so I've lived there all my life, so I know this area pretty well. And I echo what everybody said. This is a heavily used area. I live on the opposite of Bay Island. I live up in Chelsea, and so I come out directly into this area, and so I see the boats operating there all the time. One thing I'm glad to hear since the last meeting is that the option section has been removed. And so I'm confirming that, Heather? Okay. So that was one of my number one concerns, is that the water there was too shallow for the option section. The other one is the previous reefs all use shell. This one, we have a hard bottom and we're using rock. Why? You know, it's one of those areas, is that, you know, if you have a hard bottom, why you need the rock? And now we're using a precision dredge. Why not take the top level off if that's a concern and put the shell down and have zero depth change? Because it seems to me the issue here is you got use of foreign material and also the reduction of depth. And you can take care of that with the additional, with the material and the precision dredge that you have out there now. So you wouldn't have the depth change at all. So that's my concern, and then, or suggestion. And then and to summarize this, I'd like to congratulate the board on setting aside some public land for this type of restoration effort. All of Broad Bay was part of the Baylor ground at one time, and it was removed in the 1930s and became private. And at some time, when all these restoration efforts are done, I would like to be able to go out in open season on public ground in Virginia Beach and try to harvest oysters. And we don't have any public ground, so I hope you'll continue this process of giving us public ground. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Sir, you said your name was Corte?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Corte, and you boat and recreate in Broad Bay quite a bit?
Yes, sir.
Is 6 feet enough clearance over a reef?
I would think so. It'd mean low water, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I've never had some of the big 100-foot boats that come in there, so they may have a problem.
I think they generally stay to the channel coming
Yeah,
out from
generally,
the
but-
country club. But as Tiffany Burgett had already relayed, that they had, I believe, and I read a lot of these letters, in fact, all of them, they're concerned about shallow depths, as most people were, but they amended the project to cut out an area to the north that I think was shallower. And so that's why my question is, that you're in there a lot, so am I. And I wanted to ask you, as a person who lives there, is 6 feet enough clearance over a reef structure?
Assuming that the measurements that they made were accurate, which I would assume they are,
Right.
I would think they would be okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right.
Any more questions? Thank you. Phil Pullen. Okay, so it's, okay, gotcha, okay. All right. Anyone else for or against? Please come forward.
Morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, even though I'm a politician. All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. The only reason I'm coming up to speak today is Senator DeSteph and I are very close friends. He's my seatmate in the General Assembly, office mate, goes on and on.
Please state your name for the record.
I'm sorry, I'm Senator John Cosgrove.
Okay.
I apologize. Senator DeSteph does have concerns with this application. His name was raised several times by the Army Corps and others. He has been working with the impacted community, but he does have concerns on this particular area, which is in his district.
Okay.
I would say that the Code of Virginia was also referenced about what is best for the entire Commonwealth, and that's true. However, I think particular deference should be given to the people who live in and around this body of water, the people that live and recreate and boat in the Lynnhaven River Basin. That being the case, I just wanted to straighten out for Senator DeSteph. He asked me to come today. He is traveling and not able to be here, or else he would have been here. So thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Any questions? Thank you so much. Next. Come on, please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name for the record.
Norm Lister. I live on Bay Island. I'm speaking for myself, but I'm the president of the Civic League there for Bay Island. I've been following this project since its inception. I didn't plan on speaking, but as an avid skier and the tallest person in this room, I can tell you that I have absolutely no problem with a 6 foot mean low tide depth. We tube, we kneeboard, we ski in this area all the time, but only if it's smooth, because I'm a purist when it comes to water skiing. I've been living on the island for over 23 years. We use this area repeatedly over and over again, and I have absolutely no problem with this. Since the beginning, when I moved in 23 years ago, the water was always cloudy, always cloudy. Now it's become much more pure. We have a riprap bulkhead. We have oysters growing on it, which is why I like the idea of rocks. Oysters seem to like rocks, not that they wouldn't like shells. And right now, because the boating season hasn't kicked up, the water, you can see the bottom off of my dock, which is just amazing. This reef is only going to help contribute to that, get us further ahead of keeping the bay clean. I honestly, as a boater, even when you're starting, you know how your boat kicks into the water, goes down low when you're pulling something heavy like a tube. I have absolutely no problem with this project. And I, again, am a slalom skier. Unfortunately, when you wipe out or you let go, you don't go down at all. You skip across the water like a rock. Same thing with tubing. This is a great idea, a really good project. I think it's very important for the water quality. I don't see it as any impact at all as a avid boater, and I live on Bay Island. So thank you very much.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have one more. Please come forward.
Yes.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I'm a contractor, but yes.
Please
My
state your name.
name's Stephen
Please state your name
Ballard.
for the record. Okay.
Owner of SB Ballard Construction Company. I have 3 homes that are within visible sight of this facility. I have a couple of questions. Number one, I agree that 110% that this is great habitat, and it's very important. I don't think the oysters or clams are doing the majority of the work. I think the state regulations on BMPs are doing the best thing, cleaning the water before it gets in and mess up with the oysters and clams. So I think that's a big statement. Although I agree that oysters and clams help a whole lot. The second thing is there's terrible notice on this thing. I own 3 homes, my son-in-law owns 1, and we got no notice. So I don't know how come this notice problem even starts to begin a problem. Third thing, Heather, the Colonel, I agree with everything they said, but I don't feel like the people making these decisions live on that piece of water, boat on that piece of water, and see that water every day. If they did, I think they'd feel a little different. The other thing is, who on this application is going to guarantee that that water is 6 foot at mean low tide? Because I read this statement on the Colonel, the Corps, says the views, opinions, and findings of this report are not supported by the U.S. Army or position unless they've said something. So who, because I can tell you, when I build something for the Corps of Engineers, if I did put it the wrong depth, let me tell you where I'm going. Back up here, on a not so nice day. So I don't know who's gonna guarantee that 6 foot. They said they're gonna survey it. If it's wrong, if we got a problem with it, who fixes it? So I'd ask them that. The other thing is, let's, 2,600 feet from the channel and 1,300 feet from the channel. If you're doing 40 miles an hour on a jet ski or a boat pulling a tube, that's roughly 30 seconds. If I did my math right all the way here, that you can come out of the channel and be right over those oyster reefs. Now, if they're 6 feet down, I can tell you that's a lot better. That's a whole lot better. But I don't believe anybody in this room is going to guarantee every one of those oyster reefs will be down 6 feet. The other thing I'd ask you is to look at anybody here that lives in a home not on the water. Let's suppose you had a nice home, a sidewalk, and then a street. Well, between the street and the sidewalk, you got 4 or 5 feet. Okay, if I came out there and said, okay, in that 4 or 5 feet, I'm gonna put some 21 VDOT stone, which is very large, good stone, and there's no question, of course, put the right product in. And then I'll put, some worms and stuff that's good for the population, the environment out there. And when you get a car, you gotta walk around that stone to get to your sidewalk. Your grandmother does, or you do on a scooter, like me when I tore my foot. How would you like that 18 inches of stone between your sidewalk? Because that's what you're doing to the people that live here. I live here, I boat there every day, 21 years. So that's what I just like to say, who's gonna take responsible for that and guarantee it's there? And I've been there 21 years and I've seen this work. He's right, it cleans up 100%. But let's not fool ourselves and think it's all the fish, all the clams and the oysters. And I have put 60-some thousand of them down myself, so I know they work. But I think the BNP situation and the state guidelines on cleaning the water and treating the water is a great improvement. The other thing is, I can promise you, like a couple of these other people, if you just get in my boat with me for a day, I can find a lot of other locations. I do think they're placing here because it is the most economical spot, but this water changes tremendously. I mean, you can ask anybody with any size boat. That channel changes on a weekly basis. And I know a little bit about tides and currents. I built one of the largest public works projects on the East Coast up until Katrina, a little project called the Virginia Beach Seawall. So I'm pretty well aware of the swifting channel, the shifting sands, and like I said, I've lived there for 21 years. That's it. Any questions?
Any questions? Yes, Mr. Harrison.
Well, I understand your testimony. You had a question, I think, about who's responsible. Maybe we should get clarification. Would it not be the applicant or the co-applicant that would be responsible if there's a deviation from the permit, should it be approved, that they would be responsible?
Who is the applicant? I'm a little confused on that.
I think the Corps and the City of Virginia Beach were the co-applicants.
And the City of Virginia Beach's first statement came and says, we support it, but we really don't. I've seen that letter before. And then one of the representatives said, we do support it. This was kind of like the floating oyster pots where they said, well, we're supportive, but we're gonna let the Corps and you guys make the decision. But so like when I do a job for the Corps of Engineers and it's not the right elevation, I know who's gonna fix it. So is somebody in this room gonna tell all of us today that no matter what, they guarantee the top of this bed is always 6 foot below? That would be the big question. And also, terrible notice. I've got no idea what's going on with this notice. It's ridiculous. We talked about that at the last meeting, and I've got 3 homes, and my son-in-law just texted me, he has another 2 in Bay Island. He got no notice, because promise you, I would have been there if I had known. I did not know about this meeting until 2 weeks ago, but Bill and Steph called me. And Bill said when he went out there with a couple of gentlemen, there wasn't 6 foot of water. So he's not here to verify that. And I hope there is, but there better be, and it's the wrong location. Why in the Sam Hill y'all keep putting this stuff in the front of all these homes? I just cannot understand it. And there isn't, population down there with the boats, like he said, there's hundreds and hundreds of boats. On my little island behind my house, I had a wedding there last Saturday. There was 19 boats just tied up on a little 20-foot by 8-foot wide sandbar behind my home. So there's just a tremendous amount of boats, too many people, too many inexperienced boaters. And like I said, that's why that 2,600 feet out of the channel, think about it, 40 miles an hour, that's 30 seconds. How long is 30 seconds for an unexperienced boater, skier, tuber, etc. runs out here? That's what I'd like you to think about.
Thank you so much. All right. I'm going to ask Tiffany and the applicant and representative, you will come back and you can answer some of those questions if possible, please. come on.
I would just like to clarify that the Army Corps of Engineers and the City of Virginia Beach are both co-applicants on this project.
Okay.
And we also have, to the point about who's responsible for fixing it, our permit conditions do require that the applicant constructs it appropriately. One of those conditions that, if approved, would be required is that post-construction bathymetric survey showing the location of those striations, so we would be able to corroborate the construction was in accordance with the proposed plans. And then, I don't know if you want to follow up with that.
Sure, I just wanted to thank you for those that came up and spoke. I just wanted to kind of close the loop on some of those questions. So Mr. Boyles asked how much vertical relief we've had from the 2007-2008 reefs. And I mentioned they were built at 18 to 24 inches of height, and they have pretty much settled in about like 10 to 12 inches. They were built in a little bit of a softer area. This area, we do estimate the proposed reef to settle into the same, about 10 to 12 inches. One of the questions also by Mr. Corte was why rock? Why can't we just do shell? Part of it is we know shell is such a limited resource. So in order to construct a reef where, of course, we are anticipating, like I mentioned, about an inch or two of settlement, so to not have sacrificial shell sinking, as well as we would need to purchase more shell, which would be taking away from the state resource, which is something we would not want to do if possible. So also knowing the benefits over the last 15 years of oyster technologies and restoration practices, and the benefits of using both within a habitat in the different interstitial spaces. Mr. Burnett commented on safe depth for water skiing and tubing. We did do some research because that was a comment that was common, and it is recommended at least 5 feet of clearance for slalom skiing, water skiing, and wakeboarding as well. So at least 5 feet there. So we made sure again that we were above that depth. And as mentioned, of course, if boaters are practicing, safe boating practices, we hope, of course, they're wearing life jackets. As Mr. Lister said, if you were to come off a boat with a jet ski or something, you're not going to fall in. You're going to skip across the bottom, or skip across the top. And I just wanted to clarify too, it was mentioned A1 size stone. That is not the size we are using. Those are huge rocks. We are using size 2, which are 2 to 4 inches, similar to the size of an oyster shell. So we are not using big A1 riprap. I think that's it.
Okay. Any more questions? Yes, Smith.
I think this question is for Tiffany, but there is supposedly a wild clam fishery in that area. Has anybody thought about that going into? Is it a harvestable wild clam fishery?
So I am aware that there are some clam resources in that area. I'm not exactly sure about the wild fishery itself, but I do know that we have received some concerns by watermen originally about the original contoured, sort of curved structure design, and since moving those striations to be more parallel and uniform and increasing those spaces, we've been told that some of those concerns have been alleviated for those additional clamming resources or opportunities.
Any more questions, Mr. Bennett?
Yes, sir. Tiffany briefed the 30 days after construction, there's going to be another survey done for the depth and clearance. Periodic monitoring after for health of the reef. Who's going to do that? It includes the number of oysters per square meter and some other things. Does it also include what's the height of growth and also what the depth of that reef would be on an annual? How often is it done? Annually, quarterly? I'm not sure.
Sure. So yes, it will include those metrics of oysters per square meter. We're also looking at secondary production, so the type of fish and other critters that are coming. And then yes, we did add an element of the vertical relief of that. And we actually already have a contract in place with Virginia Institute of Marine Science and Christopher Newport University. And they are going to be monitoring our phase 1 reef this summer. And then the hope was that then they would start annually again to add in the phase 2.
So every year they'll be checking the growth of the reef, both with height and population of the reef. Okay.
Yes, and we do that for about 10 years.
Any more questions? Yes, Mr. Tankett?
So I'm straight here, you testified though that the reef that you currently have right beside what will become this reef is actually lower than the installation height was originally. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Any more questions? Ms. Keller?
Yes, I believe this question would be for Tiffany. Since depth seems to be the question, do you have a chart, an overlay of the area with the current depth, the current depth chart to provide?
So we just have available one of the drawings provided in the application. So if I can just get this back open and throw it up there. And it's going to be pretty small, pretty hard to see, just given the
Maybe it would help. I was more concerned about a current depth chart, not something provided by the applicant, but.
we don't have that prepared for today.
Thank you.
Yes.
So the other issue that seems to be brought up by some of the protestants was an alternative site. Can you describe what alternative sites were examined by you and or the city of Virginia Beach?
Sure. So initially, we started, the city holds a few leases. And so we had looked at one at Brown Cove, and we had started the design process in the beginning of 2021. We went out and took some surveys and were walking along the site, and our team members were up to their waist. It was just really thick mud, also very shallow. So if we were to have constructed a reef there, it would have been subtidal, so it would have been coming out at low tide, which could have posed some, issues with homeowners as well. And so we decided that that site really wasn't suitable, and we were about 35% design at that point when we realized, okay, this is not a good site, and it was very perfect timing that this opportunity came in Broad Bay, and we said, okay, let's go ahead and check that site out. So we did about 6 months of data gathering, as mentioned, did a bunch of surveys, went out, did some poll findings, confirmed with other partner agencies. We had a design charrette with a lot of technical experts talking about, okay, for this site, given the hydrodynamics, given the data that we know about our existing reefs and the movement of oyster larvae, what do we think about this site? And so that's where we then move forward with Broad Bay.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Yes, Adam?
Has VMRC staff themselves gone to this area and checked the depth?
Yes, so on October 25th, 2022, staff went out with the applicants and the former and current president of the Bay Island Civic League, as well as Senator DeSteph, as mentioned previously, and basically took a trip around the site area. That's where those buoy markers were, that's where those came from. So that's when we went out and basically assessed the area, looked at how close it was to shore and pier lines, and they also had their survey equipment or bathymetric equipment running, so we were able to, in real time, spot check those data points relative to our current location that we were in at the time. So at this time, VMRC has no reason to contest or no concerns with the bathymetric survey data that has been provided.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any more questions? All right, thank you. The matter before commission for discussion and action.
Just have a comment.
Yes, what, Mr. Franks?
Yeah, since these projects have been started, we went from 2% bad water quality to 48, and that's really saying something. I know it's not all just oysters, it's other things. But also another thing is these other projects in this area, there's been no injuries and no report of any injuries or accidents. So I think that speaks highly to how this process goes. And if somebody makes a motion, I'll be in support of this project.
Yes, Chairman, thank you. I applaud the staff, both VMRC and the Army Corps of Engineers, for amending your application over the months. A lot of the letters that I read talked about the depth and exposure at low tide and other concerns, and they're all valid concerns. But you've since carved away, not once, but I think twice, you've restructured the application to move the area, to reduce areas like that into the deeper water so that you can maintain that minimum of 6 feet of clearance. You have an active monitoring program after a post-construction survey, and then annual monitoring of the reef itself. So I don't see how this is gonna interfere. I was concerned about buoy marking, any kind of day markers, signage. That's not gonna be there to interfere with any kind of watercraft activity or vessel activity. So I don't think there's much problem with this. I'm in favor of it.
Mr. Harrison?
I appreciate all the presentation and time and effort that's gone into this project. Clearly, stakeholders are interested in this and concerned. I think some of those concerns have been addressed to the best of your ability. I did want to make one public comment about the notification process. So I think you testified there were over 600 notifications that were sent out in that, Tiffany?
So we sent out 304 adjacent property owner notifications and 21 private oyster leaseholder notifications.
Okay. So in addition to that, the VMRC's website lists every single application that's been submitted, and there's an opportunity to provide comment on any application. I do think I've heard that there's been support and opposition for this project directly in that area for stakeholders that are impacted. Oysters certainly have to be, grown at a certain depth, so it's fine to push offshore, and that's great to do that and make that concession for this project, but you can only go but so deep, otherwise your oysters aren't gonna survive. So, there's a fine line here, and I think we all agree that oyster restoration, ecology of the bay is important, so I'd make a motion to approve the project as submitted.
Okay, motion made by Mr. A.J. Harrison. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Lusk. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Discussion closed. All in favor saying aye? Aye. Any noes? I vote aye as well. Thank you so much. Second. Mark. Good morning to you.
Good morning, sir. It's hiding from me.
Thank you.
Takes several people to keep me straight.
That's okay.
Are we ready?
Yes, we're ready. Please proceed.
We're going to move up to Prince William County now, where Mr. Rodney Emmons requests after-the-fact authorization to retain a 24 by 32 foot open-sided dual-slip boathouse with lifts and associated catwalks, a 12 by 18 foot gazebo roof structure, and a 630 square foot L-head at the channelward end of a statutorily authorized private pier adjacent to riparian property along Occoquan Bay. Project is located at the green star. We're in Occoquan Bay, Interstate 95 going through Prince William County. This is the Occoquan River in the town of Occoquan here. This is an older aerial shot of the property. This is a vacant lot that Mr. Emmons recently purchased. There was no house and no pier. In September 16th of 2021, Mr. Emmons provided an application that had several drawings in the application which showed piers of different configurations and angles leaving from the property. Some showed just a pier with an L head. Some showed a pier with a boathouse and an L head. So I sent Mr. Emmons a letter at that point and asked him to provide revised drawings showing exactly what he wanted to do. We received revised drawings on November 30th from Shoreline Design, Mr. Brad Martin's company, showing a pier with an open-sided boathouse and an L platform, all that met the statutory exemption for private piers. There was no opposition from the adjacent property owners. So on December 29th of 2021, we sent a no permit necessary letter for the pier and the boathouse and the L head. Staff discovered the violation on May 31st, 2022. At that time, I was out on the lot next door where Mr. Williams had applied for a boathouse. So I noticed the pier under construction at Mr. Emmons' house and thought it looked different than what we had reviewed 6 months earlier. I contacted the contractor, Mr. Brad Martin, to schedule a site visit to review and measure the pier. That site visit was conducted on June 8th, 2022, and both Mr. Emmons and Mr. Martin were in attendance. At that time, they provided this drawing, which is basically an as-built drawing of what was out there. It shows an open-sided boathouse, dual slip, a covered gazebo, and a 630 square foot platform. At that time, both Mr. Martin and Mr. Emmons said they thought they had provided this drawing to VMRC prior and that it had been approved. After coordinating with his office further, Mr. Martin said that they had somehow not sent this in. We advised both parties that construction on the pier and the roof structure should cease until authorization was received. These are some shots taken at that June 8th, 2022 site visit. And you can see at that time that the pier and the boathouse and gazebo were basically constructed. A notice to comply and a sworn complaint were sent to Mr. Emmons on July 7th, 2023. And that notice directed him to remove the structures or to apply for an after-the-fact application to retain them. Mr. Emmons indicated he'd like to pursue the after-the-fact authorization, and he also retained the services of Mr. Carl Eason, an attorney with Wolcott Rivers Gates, to assist him in this effort. Mr. Eason brought on a third-party consultant who provided an as-built drawing for the project, and you'll see that it includes a 768 square foot boathouse, dual slip, a 216 square foot gazebo, and a 630 square foot platform. We took this application, we conducted our public interest review. There was no objection from adjacent property owners and no objection from the public. Mr. Emmons has been very cooperative and informative during all of our meetings. We believe that his lack of familiarity with the permitting process caused him to rely heavily on input from his contractor. Staff believes the applicant has a role and responsibility in the matter, but we're very concerned that an experienced marine contractor such as Mr. Martin constructed a larger pier, roofed gazebo, and boathouse which deviated from what had been sent in for approval. In considering the contractor's role, it's worth noting that Mr. Martin appeared before the commission in 2012 for unauthorized work in Stafford County. He will additionally be brought back before the commission in May or June of this year for unauthorized construction of a bulkhead in Stafford County. And he also was recently involved in a Fairfax County Wetland Board violation where he constructed bulkheads without a permit. In light of Mr. Martin's pattern of undertaking work without the required VMRC or wetland permits, wetland board permits, staff believes the contractor's role in this matter constitutes a major degree of deviation or noncompliance on the civil charge matrix that the commission has approved, and a moderate degree of environmental impact. Here's some aerial photos taken by drone last year. You can see Mr. Emmons' house is under construction, just about finished. The pier and his boathouse and gazebo are here. And here. So given the contractor's history of noncompliance and the oversized construction of the pier and boathouse, staff recommends the commission grant after-the-fact authorization for the project with the assessment of a civil charge of $9,000 to the contractor, Mr. Brad Martin, in keeping with the commission's civil charge matrix adopted in November of 2005. Staff further recommends a triple permit fee of $900 to Mr. Emmons in lieu of further enforcement action. The commission may also want to consider requiring the L head as constructed at 630 feet to be reduced to a maximum 400 square feet to align with the statutory authorization provided by the code. And should Mr. Martin choose not to agree to the civil charge, staff recommends the commission direct the Office of the Attorney General to pursue civil penalties against him for the unauthorized construction not to exceed $25,000 by the appropriate court of each day of the violation pursuant to 28.2.13.13 of the Code of Virginia. Mr. Emmons and his attorney, Mr. Eason, are here today. Mr. Bob Simon of Waterfront Construction, who made the as-built drawing, is here today, and Mr. Martin is here. And I'm sure all would like to address the commission. And I'd be glad to answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you so much. Any questions for staff? Yes. Go ahead.
I'm not sure if you said it or not. I might have been in the bathroom. It says on your recommendation, given the contractor's history of non-compliance.
Yes, sir.
A lot of history?
He appeared before the commission in 2012 for unauthorized work in Stafford County.
Okay.
He will be brought back before the commission in May or June of this year for unauthorized work in Stafford County on a bulkhead. And he has recently been involved with the Fairfax County Wetland Board violation for bulkheads without permits.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Yes, Mr. Tankett.
So your $9,000, you used the matrix that the commission came up with some
Yes, sir.
time ago. But that matrix really never took into account of what you talk about as the pattern of undertaking work without the required VMRC permits.
What we looked at is for the deviation and noncompliance factor, you look at the top, we went with major noncompliance, which shows as evidence that the contractor knew or ignored the permits were required and should have known that a permit was required. And then we went with a moderate assessment on environmental impacts.
Thank you.
Any more questions for staff?
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, Mark, thank you. In dealing with Mr. Martin or Mr. Emmons, what was their demeanor and their cooperation in working with you, either before you notified them of violations or I guess after you notified them?
They've been very cooperative, very helpful.
Both individuals?
Both individuals, and they've sent plans, drawings, anything I've asked for. They've been very helpful.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you. Appreciate it. Is the applicant and the attorney available? Please come forward. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir, I do.
Please proceed and state your name for the record.
Rodney Carl Emmons.
Okay.
My name is Carl Eason. I'm counsel for Mr. Emmons, and I'd appreciate a brief presentation if I might. So first of all, how do we get here? I've done this for many, many years, and I can tell you I have stood before a podium before knowing full well that my client went out, built something knowingly wrong, knowingly oversized, and then decided to ask for forgiveness later. And I hope you understand, that's not this man standing next to me. He doesn't cut corners. He never has. He just built his house. He didn't have any violations. He's a used car dealer and owns some dealerships. He has no violations through DPOR. And we're going to talk in a minute about Mr. Martin's history and what we have there. So first of all, before I move forward, I got to tell you, I'm sorry to see Mark's leaving and retiring. He is a delight to deal with, as many of staff are. Justin has been a great help in this and familiar with it, and of course Randy has as well. And it always makes it delightful, even though I come in on some violations every now and then. So how do we get here? We start in September of 21. Mr. Emmons decides he's going to build a house and design a pier. Homeowners know everything when they start a project, and they learn quickly they know very little. So he had a friend, Terry Smith, decide to do these little napkins drawings that Mark showed you that had deviations, even internally inconsistent, and he recognized, I better get a professional to do this. Asked around with some friends. Project was being done nearby. Unfortunately, it was being done by Shoreline, Brad Martin, and a lady named Rebecca.
Please proceed.
Please. Thank you.
Please don't interrupt. Thank you.
So at that point in time, the drawings were given, and one of the things that I did for you is in July of 22, I attached copies of all the email communications between Mr. Emmons and Mr. Martin. And you can see Mr. Emmons saying, hey, VMRC needs the money. They need to pay for the permit. So in his mind, he's thinking everything is going along rosy. We get to November. When are we going to get moving? We don't have the permit submitted yet. We'll get them done immediately. We'll anticipate having them by next week. When somebody tells you they're going to make application and VMRC is going to get you a permit next week, watch out because Santa's going to land somewhere near your house. It isn't going to happen. So we get on toward February. He asked him at that point in time, give me some copies of the stuff. Where are we? And on one of them we say, he actually says on March 23rd, when are we going to get going? February 26th. On the 23rd, a barge pulls up. We've got our permits in hand. All the assurances have been given to Mr. Emmons. That's a false, misleading representation. I don't find a homeowner culpable if he relies upon a licensed contractor with the Board of Contractors, regulated by DPOR, who doesn't show the integrity to be honest and candid in the status of the permitting process. And so it wasn't until Mark came out, when looking at Mr. Williams' pier, that he looked over and noticed the discrepancy. He contacted Mr. Emmons. Mr. Emmons contacted me. The instructions I was given was, make it right. Not hide it, not run from it, make it right. So I brought in Bob Simon to do the after the fact. The neighbor, Mr. Williams, had some concern regarding the proximity of the Emmons proposed pier with his. He had Mr. Pruitt come out and do an apportionment. Mr. Simon did an apportionment. They ended up within 9 inches or so of each other. We entered into a court order, so it's built wholly within his apportioned area. Mr. Williams withdrew his objection and vice versa to each other's pier. The Homeowners Association, where you saw that boat ramp in the aerial, they gave their consent to the project, and on we move forward. So during this process, you'll see communications in these emails when Mark came out. And by the way, the boat came in, I think, March a year ago was when it was actually ordered. And by June, Mark's noticed the discrepancy and wants a site be it. I read this, and at first I thought, the contractor is going to step up to the plate and he's going to take care of it. But I'm reading these emails in retrospect, and it says, I'll handle Mark. I now look at that email and I read it in a little different context than I read it then. Because in that one I thought I'll spare you, Mr. Evans, I'll take care of it. And when I followed up with an email that followed thereafter, he says, Mark's wrong. He's looking at the pier and the drawing wrongs. He claims it should be 1 slip, not 2 in the boathouse for NPN status. So now we'll just get it changed to show 2. We'll get it handled. He's telling Emmons, quote, don't sweat it, no big deal. It is a big deal. Anytime you build without an appropriate permit in the Commonwealth of Virginia, it is a big deal. So we stand here before you not because I feel that we have committed the transgression, but because that it exists and there is violation there. 78 feet on a roof, 230 on the deck. If I look back over our history and look at other projects that we've done historically, that kind of deviation has certainly been allowed by the commission. But wouldn't it have been nice to have the option of making that choice before it was built, not after it was built? And so what does Mr. Emmons do? Does he go out and spend another approximately $50,000 to do corrective work here? he doesn't have any lifts in. He doesn't have his jet ski lifts in. But now he's facing the process of tearing it out. The legislature gave you the discretion to make decisions, but in that discretion, they also gave you the right to make equitable decisions. And I believe that Mark is correct. The contractor messed this one up horribly, and I think that the homeowner should be allowed to achieve the after the fact. So I started doing a little bit of checking, and I found out that while Mr. Emmons was courting him and executed a contract, which was dated, I believe, in October of 21, and by the way, that contract has a specific clause in it that says contractor is responsible for acquiring all permits, including the VMRC permit. He paid to delegate that to somebody that he thought was a professional that could do it. And little did he know at the time that he was negotiating with him that Mr. Martin had his own difficulties ongoing with DEPOR. There were pending complaints. I made Justin and Randy aware of it, and Mark as well. You can't obtain that information even through a FOIA while the investigations are ongoing, only after they're concluded. But what I did find that the Board of Contractors had sanctioned him for giving false financial information when he acquired his Class B license. I did find out that even though he claimed that he wasn't the responsible party, he was the designated builder according to the DEPOR website under Robin McCormick that owned Shoreline. They later had their own litigation against each other after all this blew up. Then I went back to DEPOR more recently, and this is within the last 6 weeks. And I found out that there was a complaint that was filed 00146 in the record. And what does he do? He does to that homeowner, he says, don't worry, I'll get all your necessary permits. What do you think happened in DEPOR in the informal fact-finding hearings? It came out there weren't any permits in that case either. No permits, and this was Fairfax County. The homeowner finally hired counsel because of the unreasonable delay in the absence of permits and declared a material breach. The DEPOR finds, and I quote, and I'll be brief, I'm not going to carry with these, Shoreline's actions in this manner, namely in a series of false promises and inducements, show it had no intention of completing the project. That speaks to the character of the man that's going to stand behind you with numerous violations, in addition to the ones that Mark told you about. Then DEPOR considered another complaint that was then pending. Had he known these complaints were pending at the time, maybe he would have never contracted with Shoreline. Maybe he would have never met Brad Martin. But in the case 0086, that one suffered by inferior project materials, not consistent, and deviations, options not plumb, and the PE hired said that it was deficiencies were structural and unsafe. As a result of these complaints, and if you go onto the websites and read the DEPOR, you'll see that monetary violations and fines are astronomical against this gentleman. Well, that's Mr. Emmons' problem. Even if he has to take it out, he's got civil remedies. He can just go to court and get a judgment. The probability of collecting on those judgments is probably nil. I think that there is financial irresponsibility that's there, and I think you'll find that they're just as unsatisfied and unrecoverable as you'll find any other to be. But one thing that occurred to me, you said as a policy, I don't chastise staff one bit. Their job is to find violations, report them, cure them, and make a best recommendation. And I'm pleased that Mark and staff have said, please consider leaving this in as an after the fact. But what do you do to protect the public going forward? You have a right to file a DEPOR complaint too. The Board of Contractors even had a notation on there that he had a licensure issue back in, I think it was 2010 or 11, for giving false information and obtaining your Class B license. If you start with that kind of a history, it doesn't get any better from there. So in this case, I regret very much having to stand here on Mr. Emmons' behalf. I hope that you exercise that discretion in his favor. Understand he's been cooperative with staff and gotten the after the fact, done everything that I think he should do. Along the way, he spent a lot of money in engineering. I think Mr. Simon's firm, they did the apportionment, they did the after the fact, they did the aerials. You're looking at 8 or 10 there. I probably don't want to say in public what I've charged him. Randy's over there, he'll heckle me about it. But expenditures are great, and the prospects of yet spending another $50,000 for something that's a problem that you didn't create is repugnant to me. And at this point, I'd yield to your questions, and I'm very eager to see Mr. Martin's view on this, and Mr. Martin's view that don't worry, everything's okay, all our permits are in hand, when in fact they never were, and when those requests for them were never forthcoming.
Thank you so much. Any questions?
Yes, sir.
Take it.
So you would agree with staff recommendations, Mr. Eason.
There was an
There's a
alternate
charge to-
recommendation, so I'll be careful in saying I agree with the recommendation that says we'll pay those triple fines gladly
Yes, sir.
if we're allowed to retain them. I also agree with the recommendation that a more serious sanction should be imposed upon the contractor. Mr. Emmons is here. If you'd like to ask him any questions directly, I have Mr. Simon who did the engineering and the permitting here, just in case you had any questions from him directly as well.
Any more questions?
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone here in support?
I'm in support.
Okay, please come forward.
I'm Brad Martin.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir, I do.
All right, please proceed and state your name for the record.
I'm in support of the recommendation, the triple fines, and the triple fees and the fine. I'm not in support of being named because I'm not Shoreline. That is Robin Harvey McCormack. I entered into litigation with her on 3 of 22. It is ongoing litigation, and I'm going to add this to my civil claim. I received a judgment against Shoreline Service and Design a few months ago for $2.6 million. I've got another case going for $5.5 million. I was not the contractor. They were, she was. I was not a member of the corporation. I was not a member of the DPOR. I was none of that. 2012, yes, I had a violation 20 years ago. And it turned out it was a flood and it was a state of emergency and it wasn't a violation. It was back in the days of Dan Bacon. Anyway, Rodney did nothing wrong. Rodney's a great guy, as Mr. Easton said, follows all the rules. This was a big screw up by Robin Harvey McCormack and Shoreline Service and Design. Rodney, I consider my friend. Every phone call, email, or text he sent me, I answered. And I think the recommendations are just, and that's that. However, it's not me personally. I was not the licensed contractor. The contract does not have my name on it. And that's it.
Any questions? Any questions? All right, thank you, sir. Anyone else in support? Anyone in opposition? Opposition? All right, thank you. Now for the commission for discussion and action. Yes, Mr. Tankey.
I will move to support staff recommendation in this case.
Okay, Mr. Tankey. Move to support staff recommendation and second by A.J. Iskren. Any
Mr.
discussion?
Chairman,
Any
I would like
discussion?
to,
Okay.
I'd like to propose a friendly amendment and waive the triple permit fees for Mr. Emmons. He's clearly been, I think, a victim in this whole situation. And I think that charging him triple permit fees when he's done just about everything he could do, I think it's warranted to just charge him regular permit fees if it's acceptable to Mr. Taggart.
You accept it?
Yes, I can do that. You make a good point, thank you.
Okay. All right. There's a friendly amendment to waive
Triple permit fees for
triple
Mr.
permit
Emmons.
fees. Okay, is there a second?
I just have a question. So you're suggesting waiving the triple permit fees, but still
Only the
requesting,
triple permit fees. Only the triple permit fees.
but still requiring him to pay a permit fee?
Yes, just a regular, I think it's $300.
Yes.
$300 permit fee. Waive that only.
Okay. Is there a second?
I guess I just wanted to be clear that there needs to be, in my opinion, needs to be a permit fee paid,
Yes.
not the fine, which is the tripling of those fees. Okay, thank you.
Is there a second?
I thought AJ had second, but I'll second.
Okay. Mr. Kelly?
Chairman?
Second? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Can I get clarification of the motion? We have evidence from the property owner that Mr. Martin was in fact a contractor. I'm asking the commission whether this motion, since you're carrying forward staff's recommendation with the friendly amendment, are you assessing or not a civil charge against the contractor, Mr. Brad Martin? Can you clarify that, please, sir? for the record?
As the maker of the motion, yes, I am aware that there's a civil charge of $9,000 to the contractor, Mr. Brad Martin, whose name and signature appear on the contract with Mr. Emmons.
Any more discussion?
I got a question.
Yes.
I see that, are we leaving the dock as is? So he doesn't have to make the L-head any smaller or?
Approve as built.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think staff recommendation said a removal of 400 feet. Is that correct?
230 feet.
What is that?
Removal of 230
Oh,
feet of the
230.
L, of the deck head, of the deck would reduce it down to what could be statutorily authorized.
Is that what your recommendation was?
Our recommendation is that the commission take it under consideration. If you wish him to reduce that L head,
Yes.
I don't think we should approve it as built, not cause any removal of the structure.
Correct.
Assess the civil penalty to the contractor of $9,000, regular permit fees for Mr. Emmons, just to clarify.
Okay.
Agreed.
Any more discussion? Discussion? Discussion closed. All in favor saying aye?
Aye.
Any noes? Chair votes aye as well. Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Myers.
Agenda item 8, James, go ahead, Judge.
Did Mr. Martin need to answer up to what we just voted?
He said that he supported staff recommendation. So, and he said he was gonna put it on his civil charge, that's between him and whoever
Okay.
else.
I just wanted to clarify.
So
Thank you.
can I clarify, it's left as is?
No, we're good. Thank you. We're good.
All
Thank
right,
you.
thanks.
But he does have the right to appeal, right?
Right, he does have the
Yes.
right to appeal. Right.
He,
Have a good day, thank you.
Thank you.
if he appeals, that means it's no longer consent. So we would have to take that part off and it would come to me. That's what would happen. So either way, it comes to me.
Agenda item 8, James Witt.
Hello again. Mr. James Witt is requesting authorization to construct a 3-foot by 30-foot private timber wharf and a 16-foot by 20-foot open-sided boathouse serving his upland property situated within the Back Bay subdivision along a cove to Back Bay in the city of Virginia Beach. This project is protested by an adjacent property owner. This is a vicinity map showing the approximate location of the project area, just situated north of North Bay in a little cove that is right here. And then now we've zoomed in a little bit. So this parcel with the house under construction is the property of the Witts. The Protestants parcel is to the south, indicated by this red star. Here's a plan view of the proposed improvements. So this boat ramp is already constructed. That was something that was applied for and was not jurisdictional to the commission. So this is constructed. This is a new 10-foot deck platform that was considered statutorily authorized, and therefore a no permit necessary letter was issued for that deck. This is an existing pier deck that you'll see in photographs that will be removed. This is the part of the project that is under your consideration today. It is the 30-foot wharf, marginal wharf, and the 16-foot by 20-foot boathouse. Again, the Protestants property is just to the left on this drawing. Here's our cross-section provided for the proposed boathouse. You can see the wharf here adjacent to the existing bulkhead too. These are some site photographs. So this is looking at the two channelward corner points of the proposed boathouse. And this is the southernmost corner point. I will say that this bulkhead is offset slightly from the property line that I believe is right about where this fence is. This is facing south towards the Protestants property, so I'm standing on the pier that will be removed. This is the Protestants pier and boat. And also notice that the bulkhead steps back, I believe, about 8 to 10 feet. It does so again on the other side of the protestant's property. Now I'm standing in the completed balcony of the Witts, looking sort of northwest. This is their completed boat ramp, existing pier to be removed. This is their new shed that was recently constructed. The boathouse would sit just channelward of that. Oops, wrong way. This is facing west, so here's that shed again. The boathouse would be situated just off of the bulkhead in that area. Wrong way again. And this is facing south to the protestant's property. This is their, so applicant's shed, protestant's pier, protestant's shed. Staff met on site with the applicant to discuss the proposed boathouse and the concerns raised by the protestants last year. We also, at the same time, met with the protestants to discuss their concerns. Their main concerns were related specifically to viewshed, safety of their use of their pier and bulkhead, the ability to, or they had some navigation concerns from folks using the cove area, and they were concerned also that they would be limited in the use of their bulkhead in that 25-foot section between their existing pier and the bulkhead of the Witts property. In addition to the numerous protest letters we've received from the adjacent property owners, we did receive 8 late protests submitted over the weekend. I have those for you here.
Thank you.
So some of these folks do live within the cove. Some of them live outside of the cove. I will say that this proposed boathouse was proposed previously in a different application that was submitted in 2020. That boathouse was met with the same protests from the southern adjacent property owner, the Eberhards. At that time, there were approximately 7 to 8 revisions received in an attempt to revise the proposal to make it more amenable to the protestants. Those were met with additional protests or further protests, and it resulted in that boathouse being retracted from that proposal originally. Ultimately, Mr. Witt has decided that that is something that he would like to have to protect his investment, and reissued an application or resubmitted an application for the boathouse. We have had this application since 2021, and up until this weekend, we have only heard from the Eberhards for the protest. So this is a photo from the protestants' pier. So this is their pier, their boat. These are the 2 stake corner points of the channelward side of the boathouse, and this is the bulkhead of the Witts. This is an updated photograph taken by staff on site earlier this month. So the Witts have constructed a series of upland improvements, including a privacy fence and this shed on site. The protestant did say that view shed wasn't necessarily the concern any longer, given these additional upland improvements, but that they were still concerned about their ability to utilize their bulkhead, and were also concerned about not being able to be seen if they were to jump off their dock, for example, by other boaters in the cove. Staff is sympathetic to the concerns of the protestants regarding their viewshed and general feelings towards roof structures in Mill Pond, which is this cove area. I don't know if I highlighted that before, but this is also known as Mill Pond. The property is situated currently in a cove that does not have any boathouses present. However, most properties within the cove area do have piers of some sort and boat lifts, and many of them are situated right up against that property line or close to it. The applicant addressed some of those concerns and chose that specific location for the pier and boathouse to maximize his ability to use his shoreline, and does intend to sort of back in and out in front of his property and not rely on the riparian area of others in order to access his boat lift and boathouse. Staff also believes that there remains enough room in this open area right here for the Eberharts to safely utilize their pier and bulkhead. And they could propose to construct a boathouse of similar size in a similar placement on their property if they so choose to do so. So given that the proposed boathouse measures about 380 square feet, which is less than the 700 square foot threshold outlined in code, had it not been for the protests and then these subsequent untimely protests submitted over the weekend, this boathouse would have met the criteria for statutory authorization found in section 28.2, 1203A5, excuse me, of the Code of Virginia, and would have been administratively approved. Accordingly, after evaluating the merits of the project against the concerns expressed by those in opposition, and after considering all of the factors contained in section 28.2, 1205 of the Code of Virginia, staff is recommending approval of the boathouse and wharf as proposed.
Okay, any questions for staff? Yes.
Was there any consideration by the applicant to move the boathouse back towards the middle of his property further?
Yes, so there were a couple revisions received on this round of applications as well as the last round of applications where they have made multiple changes, including switching from a hip roof to a flat roof, moving it over a few feet off the property line. The protestants have requested specifically that it's moved over 10 feet. However, the applicant has stated that if that does occur, based on the other improvements, he wouldn't actually have the right amount of space to get in and out of that lift if it were moved over in front of the property a little bit more.
Another question?
Okay, Mr. France?
And you probably said it and I missed it, but what is the distance from the protestant and this new boathouse? From one pier to the new boathouse?
So let me go to the photo. From this piling to about the return right here, it's roughly 25 feet. I will say that the property line is scooted a little bit towards you in the photo, right about where the fence line is. So it might be a little bit less than 25 feet, but aerial measurements indicate 25 feet there.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Brandon?
And this, Tiffany, this boathouse have a lift in it?
Yes, sir.
And are they intending on getting in from the direction we're looking now or from the other direction?
From the opposite direction.
So they're looking at entering the lift, because a lot of times you can only get in one way, you know.
Yep, that's correct. So they are intending to have the nose of the vessel facing the
Facing
southern.
us looking at this picture.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm. And so they would just pull in front of their property and back out in front of their property as well.
Okay, any more questions? All right, thank you so much. Is the
I am aware that the applicant's agent is here, and I believe the applicant is also here, and as well as the protestants. And I also have some materials submitted by the protestants that they would like you to have. I can hand those out
Yes,
now.
please, thank you so much. Will the applicant and agent please come forward? Thank you. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please proceed. State your name for the record.
Yes, good afternoon, or I think it's afternoon, maybe it's not still morning. My name's Harold Jones. I'm, excuse me, with Sigma Environmental, and I have been the consultant for Mr. Witt on this project. This has been somewhat of an enduring project going back to 2021. And, excuse me, we have worked very long and hard with the city of Virginia Beach on this project, to whom, or to where they have issued a permit for those components within their jurisdiction as of April the 20th of this year. The only remaining issues that you have before you here is construction of the marginal wharf and to cover the roof over the authorized boat lift as it is right now. Locate, if you could just go back to the plan here. There it is, thank you. The boat, this is an even though it's called a boathouse, this is an unsided, just a covered boat lift, so it's not a boathouse per se, at least the way I grew up. We've gone through quite a number of iterations of drawings, relocating this component of it. It was most important that we kept the project within the extended property lines, within these property lines. This does not exceed beyond the western boundary. The bulkhead was installed by the previous property owner quite a number of years ago, prior to the purchase by Mr. Witt. So we're working with that angled bulkhead alignment and not one that's generally perpendicular to the property lines, which has created sort of a design and engineering problem with this project. Initially, we had a 4-foot marginal wharf, which is usually a minimum width between a bulkhead and a boat lift, just for safety operations by the owner, by whomever is going to egress to and egress to the boat itself. And in order to do that, I had to reduce that down to 3 feet. So you're looking at something that right now is at the absolute minimum safety margin for a marginal wharf. In terms of location, again, we've offset the piles a foot off the property line. Well, the piles themselves are set back. What we're talking about is the corner of that roof is going to be located 1 foot off the property line. So there is absolutely no encroachment of this structure beyond the owner's property line. So the last change that was made to this design was to cut the outboard tail of the roof off so that it does indeed comply with and stay within his property line. Again, this is the minimum necessary for the size vessel that Mr. Witt is proposing to purchase. In terms of view shed, again, we're in the direct linear line of both property lines, so I don't think an extended view shed and something that's not even within the state code is going to be detrimental in any way. The height of the peak of the boathouse is at 15.5 feet above mean low water. And for those people that are familiar with the low water mark in North Bay and Back Bay system in the southern watersheds, mean low water is at minus 1.3 feet to begin with, NGV 1988. So this is designed to be in at 1.5 feet. It's essentially going to be roughly about 13 feet above normal water level, or normal high tide, I should say. And it's still going to be considerably a couple of feet below the proposed bulkhead, or below the existing bulkhead, I should say. The peak of Mr. Witt's pool house that you saw in one of the photos that Ms. Burge had put up, this will be, the peak of this roof is going to be approximately 6 inches lower than that. So the view shed at an angle from the adjacent property owner is going to have to look past the peak of the roof of this boathouse first before they get to view the peak of the boat, or the roof over the boathouse or the boat lift, which will be about a half a foot lower. So again, this project has been redesigned to try to take into consideration some of the issues that the adjacent property owner has, but given the constraints of trying to keep this project within the property lines and reduce any impacts on navigation to the minimum necessary, I think is what you have before you and what has been recommended for approval by staff.
Any questions?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Brown.
Yes, sir, thank you. I see this motion for an encroachment. Is that the corner, the most top right corner of the boathouse? Is that the property line right there? You look, I see lot 74 there, Mr. Witt's lot. That's his property line you've got
Right.
identified. It's 100 feet wide. And then that horizontal line at the very top, that's the property line. And I guess the way you drew the boathouse was you would encroach that corner onto city property?
No.
Is that what was proposed initially, or?
That was proposed initially.
And that's what this encroachment motion by the city council
Right,
was?
if you, taking a look at the drawing that's up there, that roof melds right into, from the most northern outboard pile.
Right.
From
You
just
use the
slightly beyond that, looking to the north, that roof line now marries in
Yeah, so
directly
you
with.
clip the corner of the roof so you don't have an issue with the city council
That's
encroachment,
correct,
all right? Okay.
that's correct,
Because the city property exists on the other side of your property line, right?
that's correct.
And then beyond that somewhere is the state.
State-owned property, yes.
State property, okay, I understand.
Or state property, right.
Any more questions? You wanted to add something? Yes, please. Please state your name for the record. You already sworn
Jim
in
Witt.
yourself.
Good. Just want to read a quick, some notes I put down here. My wife and I certainly have empathy for our neighbors. I mean, we understand change can be difficult, particularly when you've lived next to an empty lot for more than a decade. And while we do have empathy for them, we just want to build out our property as we're allowed by the current codes and restrictions. There are no HOAs in Sandbridge. There's no restrictions on boat lifts or roofs, particular just to Sandbridge. Everything we've built to date, believe me, has been heavily scrutinized and approved by all the various city council and state officials. The remaining items that are proposed have also been heavily scrutinized and approved by the various agencies, with the exception of the final approval from this board, which we seek today, and which without objection from our neighbor we would already have. We've offered multiple potential compromises, all of which were met with the same forceful objections. Our last proposal prior to the one submitted for this meeting was the exact same layout you have before you, with one exception. About 18 square foot of the right rear roof line encroached into the city's property in the air. Our neighbor and at least one city council member made it abundantly clear at the November council meeting that no encroachment would be acceptable to them. So if you take a closer look, as we already discussed, you'll see we modified that portion of the roof so that we're entirely on our property with zero encroachment, whether land, sea, or air. I know it looks terrible, which is what the city attorney told me, but this is what we have to do to get it done. We'll do it. In closing, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of covered boat lifts in the state of Virginia. There's dozens in Sandbridge, some much larger, much higher, much fancier. All we want to do is build a basic boat lift with a roof to protect our boat. We want a simple marginal wharf for the safe entry and exit for all, to include our grandchildren and their great-grandparents. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you so much. Anyone here in support? Anyone in support? Anyone in opposition? Yes. Yes, please come forward. Please raise your right hand.
Sure.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please proceed. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Christine Eberhardt, and my husband and I are the adjacent property owners directly to the south. We're here today to ask this commission to not allow a roof to be placed over the applicant's boat lift. None of the proposed 7 changes that has been referred to in this application or the previous one remove the roof from the boat lift, or move the boathouse off the corner more than just a few feet. So our major objection was that it's right on the corner. The previous the application in 2020 did have the boathouse right on the corner and with the long marginal wharf. And we asked, at that point in time, in that design, there would have been plenty of room for him to move down the boathouse and be able to still get into the boathouse on his property. But they wouldn't move it, and they wouldn't take off the roof. So they wouldn't even move it down, even when there was plenty of room and even when there was a 4-foot margin. So we do not agree that they've made any effort to try to hear our concerns about our family's ability to still safely use our dock and safely be able to go in and out in that corner portion of our bulkhead on our jet skis. There's been reference to an encroachment request. So given that every proposal they gave had an encroachment on it. And so when I was informed by staff, Ms. Burge, that you guys wouldn't even listen to this unless the city approved it, we went ahead and we contacted our local council woman, never met her, just said, told her our story, can you please come down and look at this? And she is very hands-on. She came down and she looked at it, and she saw what we were talking about and why we felt that it was so infringing on our rights to be able to just safely use the water and safely moor our watercraft. So at that point, when it came up for the encroachment hearing at the City Council in November of 2020, when the agent came up and she did not, it was not clear. She did not in any way say that no encroachment would be approved. She just said that, I've been down there, I can see the safety concerns here. She's in agreement with the Back Bay Foundation about the roofs and how they affect the water underneath, the grass underneath and everything. So she, instead of just denying the encroachment, she didn't do that. She said, I'll give you 30 days to come back to the next meeting and bring me something. I'll work with you and bring me something that I can approve an encroachment on. So instead of doing that, the city councilwoman called me the next morning and told me that the applicant and their agent went up to her after the city council meeting and verbally lashed out at her. And it got to the extent that the police officers actually came over and stood beside her to de-escalate the situation. After that, the applicants then withdrew their encroachment request, chopped off the corner, and basically just did an end run around the city. Shortly after that, they erected the 8-foot tall vinyl fence that you can see in one of our photos and also the ones that Ms. Burge provided. At the encroachment hearing at City Council, the applicant was made aware of 14 letters from 14 other property owners that are opposed to a boathouse on Mill Pond. Ms. Burge stated that there are no boathouses on Mill Pond. There are many boat lifts, but none of the owners put a roof on them. This isn't just a coincidence. Sorry. This isn't just a coincidence. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find my notes. No one blocks their own view or anyone else's view more than absolutely is necessary to store their boat. This is done out of mutual respect for each other, but because we love watching all of the wildlife and all the water activity of everyone who comes to Mill Pond. So we appreciate, because this applicant's boat lift is located right on the corner of their property, and because of the continued opposition to the boathouse on Mill Pond by so many of its residents, we ask that the addition of a roof on this boat lift deserves extra attention. one of the reasons a permit for a boathouse can be denied, according to your website, is if its negative impacts unreasonably interfere with the public or private right of others to the use of the waterway. And we believe this boathouse interferes with these rights. A roof over a boat lift has nothing to do with safe mooring of watercraft or safe access to water. However, the roof on this boat lift has everything to do with our right to safely access the water and safely moor our watercraft. So the photos that we show in front of you, the drone shot and the one from our dock, which are similar to what Ms. Bird showed, on these we've tried to show you the effect of this roof on this boat lift has to us. In the last shot, just as what Ms. Bird showed with the fence. So you can see that they have us completely and blindly boxed in. No one on the water to the north would be able to see us jump off our dock or come out from our corner bulkhead on our jet skis, and we would not be able to see them coming at us. So we respectfully disagree with the staff's opinion that the addition of the roof only minimally adds to the boathouse's visual obstruction. A boat lift is just 4 pilings in the water, and the blind spot that it creates is dictated by the shape and the size of the boat. So now when you put this roof on it, you have something that's so much taller, and it's a much larger permanent structure that sticks out further into the water and creates a much larger blind spot, not only for us, but for everyone enjoying Mill Pond. Mill Pond, if you've never been there, is a unique waterway in the Sandbridge area. It's a cove off of Back Bay where 3 canals come together. Sandbridge residents, vacationers, and just the public routinely come into Mill Pond to get out of the wind and chop of the open bay and enjoy the calmer water. Most people come on small personal watercraft, such as kayaks or paddleboards or john boats, or they're there just free swimming around or floating around off their boats. This makes the safety hazard of a boathouse in Mill Pond even more concerning to us residents. Here are the letters from 14 Mill Pond property owners that have signed statements opposing a boathouse on Mill Pond. These are the same letters that the applicants were made aware of in November council meeting. There are only 13 rental houses on Mill Pond, so these letters represent over 70% of the primary or year-round residents. Many of these residents took the time to also send emails to Virginia Beach City Council prior to this November encroachment decision. And even more of them now. I'm not sure why they're late or why they're being deemed as late. I do know the recommendation was dated today, but it was posted on the portal yesterday morning, so which was prior to most of the comments being posted. So I'm not really sure why they're late, because I didn't realize that they had to be posted.
So are those additional additional letters right there?
No, these are letters from the same people. Some of these people have also posted public comments on your website, on your thing.
Are those letters different than the ones that were posted? That's the
Yes,
question.
oh, yes.
Then we need to take.
Okay, sure, yes, that's why I brought you a copy.
Okay.
Approach?
Come on, you could.
Yes, sorry.
I got you.
And actually, a copy of one of those is in the packet that should be in front of you.
So it's the same letter with.
I just didn't think you needed 13 of them.
Okay.
So what I mean, like, to see how 14 of them in front of you. That's in there, right? I just gave her one to show you. They all say the same thing and explain the situation and how we have tried so hard these last 2.5 years to get the applicants to talk to us and to understand our concerns over our family's ability to safely use our dock and safely use our watercraft. So these letters represent over 70% of the primary or year-round residents on Mill Pond. There's only 3 rental houses on Mill Pond. Many of these, I think it's up to, she said 8 or so, also went into your portal to post public comments. These public comments not only continue to voice their opposition to a boathouse on Mill Pond, but they also disagree with your staff's opinion that the roof on the boat lift only minimally adds to the safety hazard of the boat lift. The reoccurring message in all these opposing comments is that a boathouse in Mill Pond would create a safety hazard for all who come here. So with all due respect to your staff, These people live on Mill Pond. They know what the water traffic is like, especially in this busy, popular summer months. They know that Sandbridge is getting more and more crowded every year, and so are our waterways. And they know that this crowdedness will just get even worse with the opening of Nemo Parkway. So,
You mind wrapping it up, please?
sure, I do. Okay.
You okay?
No, I'm one sentence. Yeah. So, we feel that we have a right to access. We feel that we're blinded. This is a huge blind spot for us. We feel that the roof makes the situation that much worse. Like, it's bad enough that the lift is right on the corner, but to put a roof on top of it just makes it more of a blind spot. So we disagree that it's a minimal impact. We have a right to safe access to Mill Pond, and we have a right to safely moor our boats. We ask that you not allow our rights and the rights of its residents and all who come into Mill Pond to be interfered with just because somebody new to town wants to keep their boat out of the sun and rain.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate you. No, you don't
Sorry.
No, you don't have to apologize. You don't have to apologize.
I don't think
Okay.
I don't think
Anyone else in opposition? How many others are in opposition? Just one more?
Just me.
Okay, come on. Good afternoon to you.
Thank you.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name for the record, and please proceed. Thank you so much.
My name is Guy Everhart.
Okay.
I'm the adjacent property owner
Okay.
as well. And our concerns, the reason I think you see this structured as it is because the city would not permit it any other way. So extended access, I use my bulkhead as a dock. This makes it hard for me to get in and out. And I appreciate your consideration today.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Any questions? Okay. Mr. Witt, you want to come back up?
Yes, sir, but I will real quick.
Okay.
I just want to say on the petition, I'm sure you have a copy of it. The boat lift size is wrong. It says it says we're encroaching way out into the pond, which we're not encroaching. It says we haven't reached out to meet with them. We used our agent. After the first couple letters we saw, we thought it was best to just work through an agent to try to do this. And then as far as the city council thing, it's a video. You can go see it. Any of you know Harold? No, Harold's not going to verbally assault anybody. And you don't know me, but I'm not going to verbally assault anyone, councilwoman, especially someone like Ms. Henley. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The matter before the commission for discussion and action. Yes, Mr. Henley.
I make a motion to approve staff recommendations for the proposal.
Okay, there's a motion to approve staff recommendation. Is there a second? Is there a second? Okay. Mr. Tankard.
The motion,
Okay,
yes.
Mr. Tankard, second. Any discussion?
I'd just like to say that the staff is sometimes in an unenviable position of recommending a project because it meets the statutory requirements. And I'm not lost on that. They do a great job at researching it and making sure all the parameters are met. But there's also the issue of all the residents that live there and their objections to this being the first boathouse in Mill Pond, Mill Cove, whatever it is. So I'm just not lost on that. Okay, thank you.
All right, any more discussion? Discussion? Yeah, AJ?
I have a question maybe, Tiffany. So was it brought up previously about the ability of the adjacent property owner, the ability to ingress and egress for their pier? Was that ever a discussion on site or with you?
Yes, so we did discuss that. I discussed that personally on site with the protestant and when they were expressing their concerns about it. We also asked at that time how often they have, the response was when we have folks come to our house, they want places to tie up. And we asked, how often does that occur? How many, vessels do you typically have? And the answer was basically sporadic. They have indicated since then that they do utilize the dock to sort of jump off of. And so I think that's more of a safety concern that they might be referring to. But we do think that the 25 or so feet that is present there would be enough room for them to dock a small boat that they have in their photographs, as well as any jet skis that they mentioned.
For discussion. Discussion closed. All in favor saying aye? Aye. Any noes?
No.
And we have 2 noes. Brandon, Mr. Brandon. Chair votes aye as well. Thank you. Thank you so much. Anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on an item that is not on the agenda, please come forward. Okay. Well, let's go on to item 10. Public hearing. Proposal to amend the chapter 4 VAC 20-950-10 pertaining to black sea bass. Good afternoon, madam.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I think we do have 2 people here for public comment.
Oh, wow, we,
For something not on the agenda?
Yes.
can we hold for a second, please, staff? Okay, come on up.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said earlier.
No, it's okay.
Anyway, my name is Ricky Hall, and, you got a lot going on here, and I really appreciate y'all giving me a few minutes of your time. Some kind of way or another, I let my oyster license slip away from me. Don't know exactly how it happened, but it did, and when I went to renew it back in January, I was told that I was taken off the list.
Okay.
And I'd really appreciate it if I could get them back. And I don't know no other way to do it but come down here and ask y'all if you could help me do that. Due to some health issues or just different things, I wasn't able to actually do it anyway for the last couple of years. And then I found out in January, if you didn't participate, no, you didn't have to participate into it during the winter, but you had to buy your license. I didn't know that.
Sir, if I may, which license are you talking?
Oyster license, drudge permit.
license.
Yeah, my drudge permit.
Did you submit any information in reference to the health issues that you had?
No, I haven't, no. It was
Yes.
neck surgery, I had a cervical fusion, and it's really bad in the wintertime, but anyway,
All right,
I've
Ms.
learned to
Kellum.
live with it, so,
Ms. Kellum has a question.
I was just, are you referring to your user fee?
yes, ma'am. My waterman's card, I have all my licenses, crab license, I have a bunch of them. I got an inshore conch pipe permit, I got gillnet license, and the only one that I didn't renew was my, no, I'm wrong. The only one that I did get was my crab pipe license. That was the only thing that I've been doing for the last few years is crabbing right on through until the end of the year, like 9 months out of the year. But I did not know that I had to go and buy that user fee, that oyster permit, in order to be able to get it, if I ever needed it again. And when I found it out, it was in January, and that's when I was told then that I had been taken off the list.
Yes, Ms. Grants?
Sir, do you have any proof of your history? How long have you had a user's fee, and have you oystered?
I've worked on the water, man, my whole life. I started when I was a kid, about 10, 11 years old with my uncle. And I've been working for myself since back in the 70s.
When was the last time you oystered?
About 6 years ago.
Anyone there? Ms. Kellum?
Another question. So you oystered 6 years ago, but since then, you've been paying for your user fee
No,
except
ma'am,
for this year?
I
or-
didn't get it.
Okay.
Because I knew I wasn't going to oyster, that's why I didn't go down there and get it. And I should have, if I had have known, if I had have got something, and it's my fault, and I'm not blaming VMRC, but if I had have gotten a letter stating that if I didn't go and get this permit, that I would be not able to do this fishery anymore, then I would have got it.
So, just to clarify, how long has it been since you last paid your oyster fee?
it's been probably about 6 years since I've washed it in the wintertime.
Okay, so it's been lapsed for 6 years.
Yes.
Yes, Thurston?
Within those 6 years, you've had neck surgery. Is
Yeah.
that the only health problem or multiple?
Well, I'm 67 years old and I've been working on the water my whole life. I got a whole lot of problems. But, that's just birthdays catching up, and if I could find it in your heart to let me have them back, that'd be great. Because I lost a big part of my crab quota this year, which last fall, we took a big cut on like 20 bushels a day. And then the same thing again this spring, so that's affected my income a whole lot also.
My recollection of the regulations, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know that we can give an oyster license back if it's been lapsed 6 years.
Okay.
And you've already said that you didn't get it because you didn't know, not because you had a health problem that prevented you from getting it. And that's here, before this commission. And there's not an exception for not knowing the law.
I'll agree with you on that. You're right. You're 100% right on that. Yeah.
So,
But I got a 6th grade education and I can't keep up with all the changes that's being.
I got a question, I guess it's for Kelsey. How long is the medical, is there a medical exemption and how long would it be for?
I'm looking it up right now. It's, I don't have the regulations in the book, so give me a sec, because my phone does not like the internet here.
I can speak to the language in 720 and
Thank
at least
you.
how it's been interpreted. The way the language is written is it refers to the previous calendar year. So there is a medical exception for, in this case, it would be 2022. So that medical exception applies for the year before, not past that. And that's the way that, since those user fees have been instated and since that medical exception rule has been there, that you at least have to make that medical exception that last year you couldn't buy it, not 6 years ago.
Thank you. Mr. Button?
Thank you for vindicating my memory.
Mr. Button, is that something that you have to notify the commission of or apply for a medical exemption?
That's correct. Under current regulatory language right now, that you would apply for that medical exception, and then staff with the commissioner would make the decision as to whether or not that medical exception qualified.
Thank you.
Thurston?
I appreciate you coming down and having a conversation, taking the time to do that.
I appreciate y'all.
If you were to get the user fee reinstated, do you plan on oystering again? It sounded like you didn't really.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to. Like I said, I took a big hit on my crab quota. I mean, I lost 20 bushels a day last fall for however long it was when BMRC started this new thing that they got to help bring back the blue crab, which, hey, I hope it works, But on the other hand, when you lose 20 bushels a day and you do that 6 days a week, that took a big hit on my income. And we had the same thing going on again this fall, which I hope it works. I do.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Brandon?
Yes, sir. Do you have any oyster leases of your own?
No, I don't.
So where are you going to drudge?
Wherever the public is open, Rappahannock or James River, York River, I mean, you got a bunch of areas there that's open to the public.
Drudge on public ground.
Is that something that we need to make a motion on, or?
You would need to make a motion on it. I want to be really clear. This would be an exception to the regulation that is not in the regulation. It would not be applying the regulation or applying an exception to the regulation. And we would not have any documentation of medical hardship or how long that lasted or whether it was a medical hardship that would have prevented person to apply and pay the user fee. And as we've already discussed, it's pretty much outside the time frame. So if you want to make an exception for this one person, you can. But I just want to be clear that that's what would be happening.
Thank you. I'll make a motion to deny.
And I would second that.
Okay, motion to deny, Mr. Branson, second to deny by Mr. Brandon.
Discussion?
Yeah, discussion.
Is there a possibility if he does have medical proof of surgeries for him to come back before the commission?
Well, so the problem is it needs to have been in the previous calendar year.
Okay.
From what I'm hearing. And it also needs to have been a documented medical hardship that prevented the fisherman from fully satisfying the requirements of subsection B of this section. I will say I find it difficult to think that a neck surgery 6 years ago would cover the entire 6 years, even if that was possible. So I don't think there is a way to apply for a medical exemption here.
Thank you.
Any more discussion?
Is there any way we could table this? Considering there is time before oyster season comes back in, that we could revisit this if something else came up that we're not seeing right now?
You can table anything, for sure. It would probably need to go on the agenda at some point.
Mr. Erskine?
So, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with a motion to deny outright. I mean, this gentleman is bringing just a concern to us during public comment. I'm not sure we need to necessarily take action to flat out deny this. I would suggest to the gentleman that he maybe get the documentation together, reasoning and records and what you've done in the past in the oyster fishery maybe. Write a letter, get some help with that maybe if needed, and bring the documentation to staff and have them look it over. I'm not sure we really need to have a motion to deny, but that's just my opinion.
So,
If the intention is not to grant this request, a motion is not necessary. Lack of a motion is lack of action. This is not on the agenda.
okay, well, then I will withdraw my motion that I didn't have to make. And,
I'm sorry, I think I was not very clear when I was answering your question.
But
Mr. Francis withdrawing the motion.
I would like to recommend that we can put him maybe on the agenda for June or something and give him 2 months' time to get his records or whatever he needs and talk to staff and see what he needs to do to come before the commission, and then we can decide if that's okay with the commission.
Is that enough time for you?
Yeah, that's fine. I just don't know exactly what you want me to get together. I mean,
Your medical records.
my medical records.
In your previous oyster history?
Right.
All right.
Being that it was 6 years ago, but still, it would help, especially if you were in it, like from the time that the user fee got in, you know.
So I started oyster man back in the 70s, so, you know.
So, what my question would be for staff is, if we started the process of the user fee and stuff like that back in 2015 or whenever it was, would we have any record of him reporting anything back that far?
Yeah, you would.
We would?
Yeah. Yeah, I had a bunch of oysters back then. Sure did. And Ralph Handy and James Rugglebutt.
Again, without looking far back in the harvest record, if we've ever purchased that user fee, we'd likely be able to track that in our record. But I couldn't say that we'd be able to track harvest going back to the 70s. But if he's ever purchased that user fee, we
Yeah,
would be able to see that.
I'm just talking about since the user fee was
Yeah, well, back
enacted.
then you didn't have a user fee.
That's correct, yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right, hey, thanks a lot.
Do we have someone else that want to come up and speak? Is there one more? I don't see anyone, so. All right, public hearing.
a public hearing on a proposal to amend Chapter 4 VAC 20-950 pertaining to black sea bass to establish season dates for the 2023 recreational black sea bass fishery. Now, we're changing the recreational black sea bass season for 2 reasons this year, which I'll be going into. So the first reason is the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission and the Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council specifications process. As you're aware, this species is jointly managed since it is in federal and state waters. So the specifications process that they follow, the boarding council follow, is the stock assessment sets an overfishing limit. If we fish any harder than this, we are overfishing the stock. That gets reduced by some amount of scientific uncertainty that says, well, we're pretty sure that value is within this range. So that gets reduced to an acceptable biological catch to allow a little cushion to be a little more conservative. The acceptable biological catch is then divided by a predetermined percentage into commercial annual catch limit and a recreational annual catch limit, which is where we are here. So the recreational annual catch limit is reduced by recreational discards to a recreational harvest limit. The RHL is the limit we manage these species to. So in previous years, for example last year, the projected 2022 harvest was expected to overshoot the RHL by about 21%. So coast-wide, we were required to reduce recreational harvest by 21%. But in 2022, the council and board jointly decided on a harvest control rule called the percent change option. With that, we continue to compare the RHL to the projected harvest estimate for the current year. But in addition, we compare biomass to the target level. So, for example, we might be a little less conservative if we are at or above the biomass target. We then compare both of those to a matrix to find the percent change required for the measures, and then from there we set our management measures. So this is that matrix. For black sea bass for 2023, the expected harvest is well above the recreational harvest limit, but the biomass is very high. Black sea bass are greater than 150% of the target. So therefore, coast-wide, we're required to take a 10% reduction. In addition, the boarding council voted to follow the conservation equivalency process. So if every state set a common set of measures to achieve a 10% reduction, every state would be required to implement a 15-inch minimum size limit, a 5-fish bag limit, and a May 15th through September 8th season. This is much more restrictive than we currently have. So instead, we follow conservation equivalency, in which a single set of coast-wide measures can be replaced by state or region-specific measures. So each region or state proposes a conservation equivalency proposal. For Virginia this year, it was a 13-inch minimum size limit, a 15-fish bag limit, and a season of May 15th through July 15th and July 27th through December 31st. If we were to not pass this conservation equivalency proposal, we would be required to implement precautionary default measures, which are designed to be highly unattractive to us. So that would be a 16-inch minimum size limit, a 2-fish bag limit, and a June 1 through August 31st season. If we still didn't implement those measures, we'd be found out of compliance, and our recreational fishery would be closed. So obviously we want to end up here with our conservation equivalency proposal. VMRC staff worked with other states in the southern region to create a few reduction options, which we then shopped around to our advisors and the public through our Finfish Management Advisory Committee. FMAC voted unanimously in favor of closing these days in July 16th or July 26th. Further, FMAC recommended that the required additional closure for the February fishery be appended to this July closure for one mid-season closure, not open, close, open, close. So we're moving on to the February black sea bass season. So in the past, we've harvested around 10,000 to 15,000 pounds through the February black sea bass season. This is a special season we request, and part of the conditions of this season is that we pay back anything we catch in February. So essentially, Virginia is allowed to have this season, but we must stay landings neutral. We can't fish more than the other states because of this February fishery. And then we have 2023. We harvested about 38,000 pounds of black sea bass recreationally in this February season. So here's a little breakdown by the numbers. So we had similar, actually slightly fewer permits in 2023 than 2021, but the reported trips increased very much. The number of black sea bass landed was 18,000 compared to less than 7,000 in 2021. The estimated landing in pounds, over 38,000. And our reporting rate, because everyone who has this permit is required to report, is about 80%. So we consider that we're doing pretty well. So the 493 permittees, 80% reported, 156 of them reported trips, and 239 reported no activity. And you can see in the chart kind of where that increased landings came from. Not only were there more trips, but the trips were catching more fish because they were carrying more anglers. So, the total anglers is, if someone reports to us a trip, they'll say, I'm reporting for my permit, we carried 5 passengers. So that gets tallied up for total anglers. And the harvest per angler increased only slightly this year, but the harvest per trip increased greatly, which I believe means there were more anglers on each trip. It was also a good weather year. In past years, we see the reports come in and there'll be a weekend where no one goes out because the weekend was a blowout. This year, I believe there was probably activity every weekend and a good amount of it. So the anglers are required to report how many fish they caught and how many fish they kept, how many fish they released. And then part of the program is we have our MREP staff go to boats who called in that they're on their way in, and they weighed and measured fish to get an estimate for an average weight. We use that average weight, which this year was 2.09 pounds, apply that to the fish reported by our anglers for that 38,000 pounds. We used average harvest per trip within 2-month waves according to the MRIP data to estimate what we would have to close in order to achieve this payback. So the staff recommendation would be a 13-inch minimum size limit, a 15-fish bag limit, keep those the same, and then the minimum closure we could get away with would be a 16-day closure, which would give us a total closure, including the ASMFC and council required closure, of June 30th through July 26th. That would account for both the 10% closure and the February closure. So on page 3 of the regulation, section 45, recreational possession limits and seasons, subsection C says the open recreational fishing season shall be from May 15th through June 29th and July 27th through December 31st. And I should point out that last year we closed December 11th to make up for a projected RHL overage. We're actually able to push that back to December 31st because of this mid-season closure. So we brought a few options to the Finfish Management Advisory Committee. One option is the one you saw in our draft regulation, which was to close June 30th to July 26th, and one option was to close after July 4th. So FMAC voted 7-2 in favor of the June 30th closure. 2 of the members voted to keep the season open over July 4th. We recently received 3 public comments, which should be in your books, from recreational anglers who asked to keep July 4th open. These are the only public comments we have received. The ASMFC Management Board approved Virginia's proposed 10% reduction, and they will vote on our February reduction next month. They want to see the outcome of this meeting in order to fully evaluate our closure. But the ASMFC Technical Committee did approve the methodology we use to calculate the reduction. So staff requests the commission approve amendments, Chapter 4 VAC 20-950 pertaining to black sea bass to establish season dates for the 2023 recreational black sea bass fishery. And I can take any questions.
Okay. Any questions at this time?
Yes. If you would, please, go over the FMAC. There were 2 options presented in the FMAC. In fact, when this announcement, public announcement came out, it didn't show what you're recommending here. It showed option 2 on the FMAC, and then about 10 days ago, it was changed to option 1, which you're presenting here. So I think in fairness to the anglers who saw the initial fisheries notice that said option 2, you know what I'm talking about, and I hope you can discuss it. That was what was on your website, and now it shows a different option in your fisheries notice. So I got questions about that, so I would like you to cover both of those options that the FMAC considered, if you could, or I can.
I don't believe our public notice included season dates.
It did. Well, there was a notice on the website noticing the change of this section of Virginia Administrative Code, but it also included the option, this, maybe it's what you have here, but it didn't show the dates you had here. It showed what was considered option 2. And I think either one of those options that was discussed before the FMAC and comments solicited are probably the best, and I think a compromise between those 2 is probably the best course of action, and I'll discuss that when it comes to the commission. But if you could, discuss both of those options that were pitched to folks, FMAC.
So our first option was to close June 30th. That was the shortest option. It would only require a 16-day closure for the February sea bass season. The other option to keep July 4th open would be, originally we said July 10th, which would be the Monday after the weekend following July 4th. Staff later revised that to July 6th, which would, we did receive feedback that people wanted the closure to be over sooner. So we shifted it forward a little bit, but still would keep July 4th and July 4th with a weekend preceding open. So I can show those 2 options. So that option would require 6 more days to be closed. So most of FMAC voted for, as I have here, the FMAC recommendation. Most of the people I spoke to said in July there's a lot more to fish for. They said they probably weren't going out that far. They weren't going to the wrecks over July 4th because there was so much more to fish for. That's the feedback I received from most people. But I do know a lot of people said they wanted to keep July 4th open because it's a holiday, because families are going fishing. So that's why we have this alternate option, which would close July 7th through August 9th.
Okay. Any more questions? Mr. Harrison?
So I don't know if this is really a question, it's maybe a comment, but I'm going back to maybe your first slide that was, it's somewhat confusing, and this is ASMFC after all, but you showed that recreational harvest was exceeded, but the biomass was 150% above the target. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, so black sea bass are doing very well, but
we're looking to reduce the harvest 10%.
Because we are fishing harder than we should be in the recreational fishery.
Right.
So, our commercial industry is held to their quota that is assigned to them through the specifications process. But the recreational fishery, we can't tell one guy to stop fishing in order to keep it at the RHL. Especially with the federal management process, there could be serious ramifications of not reducing harvest when we are that far above the RHL.
Like I said, it was kind of a comment, not really a question, but it's just counterintuitive.
There was a lot of discussion about this harvest control rule, and I think we're sort of Black Bass is sort of the first test case we're seeing for it. And I believe we'll be revisiting the harvest control rule in a few years after we kind of assess how it's working.
Okay.
So that might come up in their process again soon.
All right, thank you.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I'd just like to point for the record, the email to the FinFish Advisory Committee was May 15th to July 9th and August 12th to December 31st. Not what's reflected right there.
Yeah, so,
That
like I
says
said,
July
part of
6th.
the discussion we heard was people wanted it over with sooner, so we did shift it a few days forward, just to close right after July 4th, still leaving the typical holiday period open.
Because my understanding from input that I've received is that there's basically a group that wants it open all of August and a group that wants it open July, meaning the 4th of July. And that's kind of where it is. What are the prospects of opening it on the 15th? Closing it when the fireworks go off on July 4th, so it'd be the 5th. And then taking those days that you would credit and moving it to open August earlier.
So this was our compromise. By moving that closure sooner, we were closing a few less days in August.
I'd say move it 2 more days. I mean, that's just a recommendation. To the midnight on when the fireworks go off, the season's closed, now you've closed it on the 4th, and you have the 5th and the 6th of July that you could add in August to make it more open. Because that was one comment from a member of FMAC that said, I want it open all of August if we can. And we can't do both. Keep it open July and August, and I understand that. So that's my question. Is that why couldn't you do it because people want the 4th of July weekend open, close it at midnight on the 4th of July and move it from the 6th to the 4th. And that way you give yourself a couple more days in August.
Give us one more day in August.
Oh, can you move it one more? Because of the
Because it'd be
daily
July 5th that we would be closing it.
At midnight on the
It'll be
5th?
open through the
Or at
5th.
0001 on the 5th?
This one would be open through the 5th.
This is always a question when they say it's closed on this date.
And then that would be July 5th.
Midnight on
This
the 4th.
alternate option is open through the 6th and close at the 7th.
We want it open through the 4th.
Yeah.
So that would be 2 days. The 4th.
If that's the
That's, okay, I see what
Commission's
you're saying.
recommendation.
Yeah, so if you can move it, try and give as many days in August to the anglers who want that, both the for hire and the recreational not for hire, as well as give the same people the option in July.
I think our idea had been to provide a little cushion for people who are holidaying on the 4th. Maybe they took off Monday, Wednesday, with Tuesday off, so we didn't want to quite close in the middle of their vacations.
I think the 2 extra days isn't also the problem here. The issue is that we seem to have a group of private anglers that would prefer the 4th be open, and then we have groups of for-hire anglers that would prefer the 4th be closed and have less days closed. It's not necessarily just about
My
August.
comments included for hire charter captains. It was,
Right. A different group of for-hire anglers, let's say.
They're all fishing under recreational license. Their vote counts for 1, just like everybody else.
Sure.
No sector is a monolith.
Right.
So,
it's the number of days closed that they're more concerned with versus just the August. So the
The
closure
idea here,
gets 16 versus 22.
using the MRIP waves, the estimates are by 2 months. So May, June has a higher average daily harvest rate than July and August, which is why closing starting that closure in June allows us to close less days in July and August.
Any more questions? Thank you so much. And this is a public hearing. Anyone in support of this? Anyone in support? Any opposition? Any opposition? Well, the matter before the commission for discussion and action. Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to share that I had reached out as a member of the FMAC when the email came out to recreational for hire charter captains and a whole bunch of recreational not for hire, just your regular general mill guys. And the answer that I received was more than 15 charter captains, recreational for hire guys, six-pack charter guys, said 4th of July is important and they want that open. The recreational angling community, I reached out to probably 4 dozen, 5 dozen, and then met with an anglers club. They also said, there was one that said, I want option 1, which was what the recommended action is. And the charter guys, there was one as well. But the majority said, look, we want the 4th of July, you know, it's important. While there's a lot of fish, some of the comments back were, if you fish off Virginia Beach on the rec structure, you're going to catch lots of sea bass, and their concern is throwing them back when there's so much fishing pressure over that long holiday weekend. Another was that tautog season was opening up on the 28th of June, and you're gonna open it up, you're gonna fish togs on the wrecks, you're gonna wade through a whole bunch of sea bass and throw them back. Now, at a wreck like the Tower Reef where the water depth 60, 70 feet, the mortality rate, maybe you can speak to that because I don't know how you calculate that, is probably average. But when you go to deeper waters like the Triangle Wreck, which is 95 to 100 feet, or anywhere beyond that to the abyss, mortality rate's going to go up because of barotrauma. And that was a concern. The other comment was closing this before the 4th of July was just nuts, you know, and that they wanted the 4th of July weekend to fish. Because that's the biggest catch limit that we have, 15 fish per person. Other species like flounder, sheep's head, tautog, 4 fish per person. And they just felt that was an important time to fish. So that's what I have. So I'd like to see it close at midnight on the 4th and then open in a corresponding number of days in August. However, the staff can figure that out. If you say it's the 8th or 7th, that would be my preferred option. Well, I'd like to discuss it amongst the fellow members, and before I bring forth a motion, I'd like to hear what they have to say. I have the benefit of also being on the FinFish. And so when these proposals come out, I reach out to the recreational community and do as much surveying as I possibly can and take their inputs and then share them with the staff and the FinFish and let them know what I find. So I'd like to hear what they have to say, and I'm ready to make a motion, but I'd like to hear from the fellow members in fairness.
Yes.
So I appreciate that. What I would say is I don't think this is gonna cover everybody, period. You're not gonna satisfy everybody. This is one of those ones where you're in between. So you're gonna try and do what you think is right. I appreciate the FMAC recommendation that's there and staff recommendation working on it. But I think it's one of these cases where you're just not gonna reach everybody on this. So it'll be slightly different. So I'm fine if you wanna propose an amended motion.
I move that we close the 2023 sea bass season on the 4th, midnight on the 4th of July. And then Shauna, you can tell me if it's the 8th or the 7th.
The season would be open seasons would be May 15th through July 4th, and then August 7th through December 31st.
I move that we open the recreational sea bass season on May 15th through July 4th and close it on the 5th, reopen it on 7th. Thank you for doing the math.
Motion on the floor made by Mr. Brandon.
Second.
Second by Mr. Erskine. Any discussion? Any discussion? Yes, Mr. Taylor?
I see what you're saying. However, July 4th, if I looked at the calendar, is what, Tuesday, right? I mean, people get time off, recreational people get time off around 4th of July. I'd like closing it on July 6th. I don't understand why you do something different than that.
It's, yeah.
Just for a couple of days, I'm having a hard time.
Well, because if I can add, sure. The group that wanted the FMAC organization wanted as much August as they could get. I spoke to one of the for hire captains who's on the FMAC, and he wanted as much August time available as possible. That's the reason why.
And I spoke to the same one. I spoke to Skip too. What he wanted was the least number of days closed and the most amount of weekends in August open. Moving these couple of days gets him no more weekends, and it gets him no less days closed. So fuddling over a couple of days here and there isn't really providing any compromise one way or the other. This was the best compromise that we could come up with between the other two options that had been given FMAC. And to Mr. Tankard's point, that was the point of going to July 6th, was to allow a little bit of buffer for those who might have some extra days off around the 4th of July. So that's why we didn't fuss with the days too much more than the July 10th closure that we had previously had in front of FMAC. We backed it up to the 6th to give it a little bit more of a buffer, but again, it's still not really getting to what Skip was kind of asking for. It's the less number of days and the most amount of weekends. We can't get it to that far back and give him another weekend.
I got inputs on all kinds of stuff you can imagine. On somebody who counts weekends, because that's the only time they can fish, weekends and holidays, and they counted numbers of weekends and did that mental gymnastics. And then others said, well, the extra 6 days, 4 or 5 of them are during a weekday, so it didn't matter because they fished the weekend. I mean, the comments, I can only imagine what you get. The comments were crazy, you know, for a lot of reasons. And so, you know, I appreciate the staff taking that all in and looking at all the different options, and because you're the experts on counting recreational daily harvest and advising us to say, well, you get this if you do that, and I appreciate that.
So, Mr. Chairman, did I hear that there was a friendly amendment for the 5th? Is the maker of the motion okay with that?
Yeah, I would be okay with that. I just thought I was.
Motion still on the floor.
Yeah, there's a motion seconded,
Right.
and Mr. Erskine wants to amend my motion to
No, I
read
thought
what
Mr. Tankard did, but that's fine.
alternate.
Yeah, alternate option would be my substitute motion.
I agree with that.
Can you clarify
Can you
what the
clarify the motion,
substitute
Mr. Branson?
motion?
Well,
Yeah,
My substitute motion is
Yeah.
the alternate option with the fishing season being from May 15th to July 6th, August 9th through December 31st.
okay.
Okay, all right, is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, motion and proper second. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Discussion closed. All in favor saying aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Branson, appreciate it. All right, so
Staff deals with.
with that being, I want to say thank you all and wishing Commissioner Green a speedy recovery, praying that he's healed in advance. And there being no further business, the meeting is adjourned, and the next commission meeting will be on Tuesday, May 23rd, 2023. Thank you.